Chapter 578. District 5. Time passed little by little. Before he knew it, Xueqi had spent over an hour inside the bar already. Although he had not done anything in particular, he had gained an enormous harvest. The bar was somewhere players often conversed and exchanged information with each other, so collecting information was effortless, particularly information regarding District 5. After going through the information he had, Xueqi finally understood what kind of place District 5 was. He could not help but admit that it was similar to the real world. To put it simply, District 5 was a simple shelter that allowed players to stay at a close distance to high-leveled monsters, removing the need to waste large amounts of time on travel. As there were no teleportation arrays here, players had to rely on their own 2 feet to get anywhere. Due to the large number of ferocious monsters in the area, players would generally form parties when venturing into the fields, not daring to go solo. Any player capable of moving solo in the fields was an expert among experts. These solo players were known as mavericks, and they were the definition of strength. Hence, they were admired by many players. Besides that, shelters also served as a defensive measure against monster assaults because the nights in this place was extremely terrifying. How terrifying were they? At nighttime, monsters would group up and actively assault players. Even a 100-man team would not survive without the protection of the shelter. Moreover, even if players were inside the shelter, they still needed to face the tsunami of monsters. Hence, the players here had no choice but to work together to fend off these monsters. If the shelter were compromised, then the activity range of players would be similarly affected. They would have no choice but to move their base of operations to a lower-level region. In the future, if they wished to grind high-level monsters, they would have to waste a lot of time traveling from a low-level region to a high-level region. Meanwhile, the nights here were longer than days. Out of the 48 hours in each day, 30 hours consisted of nighttime with only 18 hours of daytime. The time available for players to level up and improve themselves was much more limited. This situation further emphasized the importance of shelters. After all, if players were to waste 8 to 9 hours on travel every day, how were they supposed to level up? Nevertheless, it was this dire situation that allowed the players here to have very high levels. District 5 was one of the shelters located in a high-level region. The players here did not have to waste a large amount of time on travel to encounter high-level monsters, go to high-level dungeons, or take on high-level quests. As the players here had to face the assault of a monster army every night, not only could they gain a considerable amount of EXP from killing these monsters, but they could also take the opportunity to complete high-level quests, obtaining significant sums of money and equipment. Meanwhile, the most precious resource for a shelter was the soul crystal. This item could be used to strengthen the magic array enveloping the shelter, significantly weakening the monsters within the magic array's range and giving players an easier time pushing back the monster armies. If players donated soul crystals to the shelter, they could receive large amounts of contribution shares in return. Contribution shares were equivalent to money in shelters, and players could use these points to purchase some specific items to strengthen themselves. For example, the Tier 1 curse that Iron Wrist's party wielded was one of the good items acquired using contribution shares. Hence, the players here had a great desire for soul crystals. Only, this item was truly useless to Xueqi. He would not be living in this place. He was only going to stay here as a guest until he completed his quest. Although the soul crystals are useless to me, it won't be a bad idea to exchange them for some gemstones. Xueqi suddenly thought of a good idea to make money as he looked at the 3 soul crystals inside his bag. Compared to the outside world, gemstones were much more easily obtained in this place. During the monster attacks at night, there was no lack of chieftain and lord-ranked monsters. Chieftains had a high chance of dropping Tier 1 gemstones, while lords might even drop Tier 2 gemstones. Hence, the supply of gemstones here was much higher. In the outside world, players very rarely had the chance to inlay gemstones into their equipment. In here, however, it was very normal for players to have all the equipment on their bodies inlaid with gemstones. As a result, the basic attributes of the players here were much higher than those of players in the outside world. Meanwhile, the prices of gemstones here were also much cheaper. Outside, each Tier 1 gemstone sold for 10 silver, whereas Tier 2 gemstones sold for 90 silver to 1 gold per piece. In here, however, 5 silver could buy a Tier 1 gemstone, whereas Tier 2 gemstones only cost around 40 silver. As for soul crystals, each piece could sell for up to 40 gold. Even then, players would still fight to buy it. The drop rate of soul crystals was abysmally low, and only chieftains that were level 40 or above had a slightly higher drop rate. This was also the reason why Iron Wrist's party had gone hunting for chieftains over level 40. By the time Xueqi was done compiling the information he had gathered, Iron Wrist had also entered the bar together with a silver-armored guardian knight. The instant this bearded man with thick eyelashes entered, the bar fell silent. Every player inside the bar immediately turned to look at this guardian knight one after another. What's the party leader of the third party, Discipline Paradise, doing here? Is Discipline Paradise here to recruit members? How could it be? That's the third party of our District 5. Even if he were recruiting more members, he would choose from their list of available candidates first. Why would he come to a bar looking for members? I heard that the 6 official members of the third party have all learned Tier 1 curses and taboo skills. They can go out to grind without fear even during the night. That's right. The third party's strength is currently the closest to the first party. It is highly possible that, after the next ranking battle, Discipline Paradise will become the leader of the second party. Everyone inside the bar looked at the silver-armored knight with gazes of admiration and reverence. In a shelter, the higher ranked a party was, the more resources they could obtain. In addition, they would also gain greater access in the shelter, allowing them to purchase items that were not available to regular parties. That way, their party's strength would improve even faster. Soon, Discipline Paradise and Iron Wrist arrived before Xueqi, who was currently seated at a corner of the bar. Brother Expert, let me introduce you. This here is the leader of our District 5's third party, Discipline Paradise. He's quite knowledgeable about the dark den you spoke of, Iron Wrist said, smiling. Hello, you can just call me Discipline. Discipline Paradise smiled. Although Discipline Paradise was one of the powerhouses of District 5, he did not display any form of arrogance. On the contrary, he was a very kind and straightforward man. When the surrounding players saw Discipline Paradise, the leader of the third party, and Iron Wrist, the leader of the seventh party, actively greeting a swordsman that none of them had ever seen before, every one of them was stupefied. Who is that person? Why haven't I seen him before? Is he one of the top 10 party leaders of some other district? I don't think he's just limited to being in the top 10, right? Didn't you hear Iron Wrist calling that person an expert? That person might even be one of the top 3 party leaders of some other district. Otherwise, why would Discipline Paradise personally come over to meet him? Everyone began guessing at Xueqi's identity one after another. However, Discipline Paradise's next words instantly shocked everyone inside the bar. Brother Xueqi, would you be willing to join our District 5's Crusading army? Chapter 579. Crusading Army. Join the Crusading Army? Xueqi began pondering silently. He did indeed want to go and take a look at Gloomy Valley, with his goal for going there being the Chapter of Darkness. After all, there might be some sort of connection between the chapter and the Bible of Darkness. However, he had intended to go there by himself. There was only a single Chapter of Darkness. With so many people wanting to obtain it, how was he supposed to get it if he went with a group? It was also unlikely that everyone would give him the Chapter of Darkness. Hence, the only way for him to obtain it was to move alone. That way, he would not have to share the chapter with others. Based on the information he had gathered earlier, there was no need to defeat the Great Lord Noya to get the Chapter of Darkness. The Great Lord was simply guarding the Chapter of Darkness. Hence, Xueqi could just steal the chapter. There was no real need for him to conquer the Great Lord. The difficulty of obtaining the Chapter of Darkness this way was undeniably much lower. Moreover, he had already succeeded in carrying out similar feats in the past. Previously, he had stolen an imperial heirloom from the Anubis's gatekeeper, a great lord-ranked monster. Afterward, he had also snatched the god crystal from a Tier 4 mythic creature, the Orc King Trezek. The first theft was difficult, but the subsequent one was easy. Currently, he had much more confidence in stealing an item from a great lord. That's right, join the Crusading army. To be precise, I am asking you to join our third party, Discipline Paradise said, his eyes filled with sincerity. Hearing Discipline Paradise's words, all the players inside the bar could not help but turn to look at Xueqi, envious expressions appearing on their faces. The crusade this time was not something just anyone could participate in. As it was a crusade against Gloomy Valley, the number of players they could bring was limited. Naturally, they would only allow elites to participate in it. That way would increase the chances of success considerably. Meanwhile, in District 5, only the top 10 ranking parties received direct admission into the Crusading army. Everyone else had to go through a test, and only the best could join the crusade. There were many players in District 5. Meanwhile, only a total of 100 slots were allotted to District 5 for the crusade. Among them, 60 were already assigned to the top 10 parties, so everyone else would have to fight for the remaining 40 slots. One could just imagine how intense the competition would be. Now, Xueqi could join the third party directly and participate in the crusade without having to compete over those 40 slots. This was practically a gift from the heavens. As long as the crusade succeeded, the 100 players participating in it would receive a bountiful harvest, particularly in terms of contribution shares for the shelter. How could this situation not make others envious? Discipline, how can you be so underhanded? Iron Wrist suddenly called out. Even if Brother Yifeng is going to join the Crusading army, he should be joining my 7th party, not your 3rd party. I only invited you over to discuss matters relating to the Dark Den. When Iron Wrist had gone looking for Discipline Paradise earlier, he had told the Guardian Knight everything about his encounter with Xueqi. However, he had not expected Discipline Paradise to actually play such a card. No matter how one looked at it, Xueqi was a maverick with frightening strength. Although the Crusading army this time had gathered the power of multiple districts, after the crusade succeeded, the number of contribution shares awarded would be based on each party's performance in the crusade. In other words, the party that was the most helpful during the raid of the Great Lord Noya would receive the most contribution shares once the Great Lord was defeated. Most importantly, the party that received the highest contribution shares had priority in choosing from the loot. If Iron Wrist could get a maverick like Xueqi to join the 7th party, his party strength would no doubt soar. At that time, the number of contribution shares they could obtain was self-evident. Hence, he was doing everything he could to befriend Xueqi. This is not a first-come, first-served thing. Moreover, regarding this matter, I won't back off even if you're my friend, Discipline Paradise said in a righteous tone. Also, it will be of great help to Brother Yifeng if he joins my 3rd party. Suddenly, Discipline Paradise and Iron Wrist began arguing with each other over Xueqi. What is this situation? Can someone tell me who that swordsman is? The scene of 2 District 5 big shots arguing over an unknown swordsman stunned the players drinking inside the bar. Great help. Xueqi could not help but ask, may I know what kind of help Brother Discipline is referring to? The Chapter of Darkness. Discipline Paradise sent a whisper to Xueqi. This item serves a huge purpose for shelters. However, it is also closely related to the Dark Denver. From the information I gathered, the Chapter of Darkness is a key meant to open the Dark Denver. Since Brother Yifeng wishes to go to the Dark Den, you will naturally have to obtain the Chapter of Darkness. However, the Chapter of Darkness is in the Great Lord Noya's hands. If one wishes to obtain it, they will have to either kill or steal the chapter from the Great Lord. Only, the latter option is practically impossible. The only feasible method to gain the chapter is to kill the Great Lord. As long as Brother Yifeng joins our party, we will definitely have a chance to become the top contributing party in the crusade. At that time, we can choose the Chapter of Darkness as our reward. I will then use the Chapter of Darkness to open the Dark Den for Brother Yifeng. What does Brother Yifeng think about this? So that's the case. Xueqi suddenly came to a realization. Nodding, he said, all right then. I'll agree to your proposal. However, I wish to change the conditions a little. Change the conditions? Discipline Paradise asked, slightly worried. What conditions? You can't be wanting the Chapter of Darkness itself, right? The Chapter of Darkness had only 2 functions: empowering the magic array of a shelter and opening the Dark Denver. To a maverick, the first function was obviously useless. This was also the reason why Discipline Paradise had come looking to cooperate with Xueqi. Rest assured, I don't want the Chapter of Darkness. Only, if I manage to obtain the Chapter of Darkness by myself, what will you use to exchange for it? Xueqi asked secretly. Obtain the Chapter of Darkness by yourself? How can that be possible? Discipline Paradise asked, stunned. I am only saying if, Xuefeng laughed. If you manage to get the chapter of darkness by yourself, I will definitely provide you with sufficient remuneration. Taboo skills, curses, top-tier equipment, whatever, as long as you are willing to exchange it. Discipline Paradise did not know what was going through Xuefeng's mind, but if he could obtain the chapter of darkness, it would be of great help to their party. Hence, he was willing to pay any price for it. Xuefeng was slightly stunned after hearing Discipline Paradise's words. Exchanged taboo skills can be traded? Xuefeng asked softly. Discipline Paradise nodded. Of course. Only, the price required to do so is somewhat high. However, for the chapter of darkness, I am willing to pay 6 tier 1 taboo skills. 6. Xuefeng shook his head. If I obtain the chapter of darkness, I want to exchange it for a tier 1 taboo skill for every class, as well as the activation of the Dark Denver. Can you really do it? Discipline Paradise asked in surprise. A tier 1 taboo skill for every class. This price was indeed frightening. Even for Discipline Paradise, this was a very steep price. The chapter of darkness was merely a dark gold item with a somewhat special function. In truth, it was worth only 7 or 8 pieces of dark gold equipment. Meanwhile, the value of a taboo skill was no less than a piece of dark gold equipment. Since there was a total of 12 major classes, that meant a total of 12 taboo skills, equivalent to 12 pieces of dark gold equipment. Dark gold equipment was considered a luxury item for any party. If one had to give away 12 pieces all of a sudden, any party would feel a sting in their hearts. However, compared to this painful price, what Discipline Paradise was most concerned about was whether or not Xuefeng could obtain the chapter of darkness. Chapter 580. Abyssal Upgrade. In response to Discipline Paradise's question, Xuefeng only smiled while remaining silent. Receiving such a reply from Xuefeng, Discipline Paradise didn't get angry. His eyes glowed with excitement, instead, his trust in Xuefeng growing even stronger. Previously, he had heard from Iron Wrist that Xuefeng had managed to defeat a level 42 chieftain-ranked dark magic serpent all by himself. This was definitely a feat that no ordinary person was capable of. Currently, there were only 10 parties capable of hunting dark magic serpents in District 5. Other than their excellent techniques and equipment, the main reason why these 10 parties were equal to the task was their having learned tier 1 taboo skills that countered these chieftains. Otherwise, they all would be powerless against dark magic serpents. As for defeating a dark magic serpent single-handedly, not even he, the leader of District 5's third party, had ever dreamed of attempting such a feat. Due to this reason, he had come over personally to invite Xuefeng to join their team and aid them in competing for the chapter of darkness. When will Brother Yifeng be able to obtain the chapter of darkness? Discipline Paradise asked somewhat anxiously. Hints of reverence and elation gleamed in his eyes. Although several districts were participating in the crusade against the Great Lord Noya this time, Noya was a level 40 Great Lord. Even if everyone combined their power, victory over the Great Lord was still a long shot. They had made ample preparations, yet their current predicted success rate was below 10%. The odds for stealing the chapter of darkness weren't worth mentioning. It was not easy for a party to survive in a shelter. Besides constantly competing over the party rankings inside a shelter, parties also needed to defend the shelter every day lest the shelter fall into ruin and all their efforts come to naught. Now that an expert like Xuefeng had shown up, the third party would have a much better chance at obtaining the chapter of darkness. Noya was no ordinary Great Lord. It was a guardian monster serving as the key for activating a new map. Such guardian monsters normally tested a player's individual abilities. Having more players participating in the crusade would only lead to more mistakes occurring. Ever since God's Domain began, Mavericks had been the ones to activate many of the new maps. Hence, everyone in this place revered Mavericks greatly as they had managed to accomplish a task that most parties couldn't. Meanwhile, this was the first time Discipline Paradise encountered a Maverick as strong as Xuefeng. Xuefeng's chances of obtaining the chapter of darkness were definitely much higher than their crusading armies. I'll give it a go as soon as possible. Xuefeng could not give an accurate timeline. After all, he had not yet seen Noya personally. However, with his equipment and means, he should have an excellent chance of stealing the item the Great Lord was guarding. I hope that Brother Discipline can prepare the Tier 1 taboo skills as soon as possible. Tier 1 taboo skills and curses were not cabbages piled high in the market. Based on the information Xueqi had collected, out of the tens of thousands of players in District 5, only the top 5 parties possessed 6 or more Tier 1 taboo skills and curses. Iron Wrist's 7th party had 2. However, currently only one of his members had succeeded in learning a Tier 1 curse. One could just imagine how difficult it was to obtain Tier 1 taboo skills and curses. Brother Yifeng can rest assured on this point. As long as you succeed in getting the Chapter of Darkness, I will definitely hand over 12 Tier 1 taboo skills. Discipline Paradise laughed confidently. Following which, Discipline Paradise shared with Xueqi specific information regarding Noya. Unfortunately, Xueqi and Discipline Paradise's conversation in a private chat dismayed Iron Wrist, who was seated beside the two. However, seeing how Discipline Paradise, the leader of the third party, was acting so respectfully with Xueqi, Iron Wrist also could not help but feel a little prideful. After Discipline Paradise left, Xueqi looked at the depressed shield warrior and said, "Brother Iron Wrist, can I get you to help me with something?" "Brother Yifeng, please don't hold back. You are our party's savior. If you have anything you need help with, just tell me," Iron Wrist assured, clapping his chest. "Can you help me exchange these soul crystals for some level 30 fine gold ranked or above weapons?" Xueqi asked as he took out 3 gray crystals from his bag. "Heavens! You actually have so many soul crystals." Iron Wrist's eyes nearly fell out of their sockets when he saw the 3 soul crystals Xueqi produced. He finally realized why Xueqi seemed to care little about soul crystals before. In order to obtain just 1 soul crystal, their 7th party had spent several days hunting dark magic serpents. In the end, they had gotten 1 only by sheer luck. He had even shown off their party's harvest in front of Discipline Paradise. Yet, now, Xueqi just casually took out 3 soul crystals. Seeing that Iron Wrist was still silent after quite some time, Xueqi could not help but ask, "Has nobody managed to obtain level 30 fine gold weapons yet?" The players residing in District 5 were very high-leveled. The high-ranking parties often challenged monsters of higher levels. Although only a few parties were capable of defeating level 40 monsters, there should be plenty that could handle monsters that were level 30 or so. Xueqi had also seen plenty of players selling level 30 bronze and mysterious iron equipment on the streets earlier. Moreover, they were selling the items very cheaply. This was a scene that had yet to appear in White River City. However, after giving it some thought, Xueqi found it to be reasonable. The players here were killing monsters day in and day out, especially since monster armies attacked the shelter at night. They were improving their combat techniques daily. In addition to other factors, such as gemstones, challenging monsters of a higher level was routine. However, while the players here found it very normal to fight against monsters of a higher level, it was a different story for the players outside the Dark Den. Players outside preferred to grind monsters of a lower level whenever possible. They definitely would not choose to grind monsters that were of the same level as, or even higher level than, they were, as doing so would mean increased risk. As a result, players outside the Dark Den improved their combat techniques and upgraded their equipment at a much slower rate. "That's not it. Brother Yifeng, do you really want to exchange soul crystals for weapons? That's just such a waste." Although the market value of a soul crystal is equal to 1 level 30 dark gold weapon or 5 fine gold weapons, no one who manages to obtain a soul crystal would exchange them for equipment or weapons. After all, weapons and equipment will depreciate with time. On the other hand, the contribution shares one can acquire with soul crystals will never lose their value. The true value of a soul crystal is far above a level 30 dark gold weapon. It will be an even greater loss if you exchange it for level 30 fine gold weapons, Iron Wrist advised. The shield warrior's words rendered Xueqi somewhat dumbfounded. Soul crystals were really of no value to him. On the other hand, the value of fine gold and dark gold weapons was much higher. As for why he wanted these weapons, he was planning to upgrade the Abyssal Blade to level 30. A level 40 Great Lord was no pushover, and it would be to Xueqi's benefit to increase his combat power as much as possible. As a magic weapon, the higher leveled the Abyssal Blade was, the higher its attributes and quality would be. When Xueqi first obtained the Abyssal Blade, the magic weapon's attributes were only equal to a secret silver weapon. Now that the weapon was level 25, its attributes were already above dark gold rank. If Xueqi upgraded it to level 30, it might reach the standard of an epic weapon. A level 30 epic weapon would definitely push his combat power up to a whole new level. At that time, he would have much more confidence in stealing the Chapter of Darkness. Seeing how Xueqi was insistent on exchanging his soul crystals for weapons, Iron Wrist had no choice but to comply and think of a way to carry out the Maverick's wishes. An hour or so later, Iron Wrist had managed to exchange the 3 soul crystals for 1 level 30 dark gold weapon and 11 level 30 fine gold weapons. After Xueqi received the weapons, he parted ways with Iron Wrist and went searching for a secluded location. The commotion the Abyssal Blade caused with each subsequent evolution grew increasingly larger. Now that Xueqi was about to upgrade the magic weapon to level 30, the aftermath would definitely alarm the entire District 5. Not wanting to attract any attention to himself, Xueqi had no choice but to head for an out-of-the-way spot. Devour. Xueqi chose to upgrade the Abyssal Blade upon arriving at a wilderness with no other players around. Chapter 581. Epic Weapon. The moment Xueqi's finger made contact with the system window, the pitch-black Abyssal Blade released a dragon's roar. The deafening roar sounded as if an actual dragon stood before Xueqi right now. With such a ferocious roar, even the birds in flight were petrified, falling out of the sky one after another. Immediately after letting out the dragon's roar, the Abyssal Blade struggled free from Xueqi's hand and flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, the pitch-black Abyssal Blade transformed into a cloud of black mist that devoured the 11 sacrificial weapons. As it consumed the weapons, Xueqi could also hear a strong heartbeat coming from the black mist. It was as if an ancient creature was awakening. A terrifying aura washed over Xueqi and his surroundings. The nearby greenery even withered. Why is there such a huge difference in power from the last evolution? Xueqi looked at the black mist floating in midair, frowning. Is this the beginning of a backlash? Xueqi had never witnessed or heard any details about the backlash of a magic weapon before. In the past, players who obtained magic weapons had never disclosed any information regarding backlashes. They only advised others to stay as far away as possible from magic weapons. The pressure the Abyssal Blade was currently emitting was incredibly terrifying. Back when Xueqi upgraded the magic weapon to level 25, he could still move about relatively easily under the aura the weapon emanated. Now, however, even motion was a luxury. He could only stand still and watch quietly as all of this happened. After a while, the magnitude of the heartbeats gradually increased. The black mist in the sky also took the shape of a black heart. Meanwhile, with this black heart as the core, a vaporous phantom of a black dragon appeared. The black dragon silently looked down on Xueqi, a human-like playful expression contained within its blood-red eyes. In the next moment, the phantom dissipated into nothing, this time transforming into a silver sword that landed at Xueqi's feet. The phantom of the black dragon is becoming more realistic with each subsequent evolution. Even the pressure it emits is growing stronger. No wonder so many players dared not use magic weapons even though they had obtained them. Xueqi frowned slightly as he looked at the Abyssal Blade, which had stabbed into the ground. When and where a backlash would occur, nobody knew. Continuously strengthening the Abyssal Blade was equivalent to enhancing the power of the magic weapon's backlash. Just the current Abyssal Blade could already make him feel fearful. If he continued upgrading the Abyssal Blade, he might really fail to cope with the backlash. This should be the so-called the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Forget it. Let's take things as they come. Xueqi shook his head, dispelling the negative thoughts in his head. He then pulled out the Abyssal Blade and took a look at its attributes. Abyssal Blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon. Attack power plus 633. All attributes plus 42. Attack speed plus 15. Ignore levels plus 15. Attacks have 50% chance to cause 200% damage. 25% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases attack speed by 2%, up to a maximum of 20%. If wielder belongs to any swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 3. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 30. Can be upgraded. Devour 20 level 35 fine gold weapons and 3 level 35 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 35. Can be evolved, unknown. Additional skill 1. Phantom Kill. Instantly creates a doppelganger. You can control this doppelganger. Doppelganger will have 70% of original body's attributes and all skills. At the same time, doppelganger and the original body can be swapped. Duration: 1 minute. Cooldown: 5 minutes. Additional skill 2. Abyssal Bind. Binds enemies and prevents movement, reducing defense by 100%. Duration: 4 seconds. Cooldown: 1 minute. Additional skill 3. 9 Dragon's Slash. Instantly creates 12 phantoms of the Abyssal Blade for wielder to use. Each phantom sword is capable of dealing up to 50% damage. Duration: 30 seconds. Cooldown: 5 minutes. Additional skill 4. Abyssal Curse. Prevents all targets within a radius of 30 yards from moving or attacking for 5 seconds, as well as reducing all their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Cooldown: 40 minutes. Additional Profound Inheritance. Black Emperor. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of Death Aura. Each stack of Death Aura can be used to increase all attributes of wielder by 2% and attack speed and movement speed by 1% for 10 seconds, or be used to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 3 seconds. Maximum of 30 stacks of Death Aura. Duration: 10 minutes. Cooldown: 15 hours. The Abyssal Blade was personally created by Master Smith Ulysses using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, and it is ranked 31st. However, this sword has been cursed by the Black Dragon King. Aside from providing the wielder with immense strength, there will be a backlash every period of time. However, after being remodeled by Jack using a star crystal, the strength of the backlash has been greatly reduced. If the wielder is unable to suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the curse of the Black Dragon King, permanently reducing all attributes by 50%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Such a high attack. This is equal to the attack power of a level 30 epic ranked two-handed sword, right? Xueqi exclaimed in surprise. Back when the Abyssal Blade was level 25, its attack power had only been over 400. Now that the magic weapon was upgraded to level 30, its attack power had actually increased by over 200 points. Not to mention, the weapon skills had also undergone a transformation, with Abyssal Curse replacing Dark Violent Dance. Used against a single target or a group, it was an extremely powerful control and weakening skill. However, this was still not the most significant change to the Abyssal Blade. Swinging the magic weapon lightly, Xueqi felt as if the Abyssal Blade was an extension of his arm, so much so that he could even feel the sword's edge cutting through the air. What's going on here? Xueqi looked at the Abyssal Blade incredulously. There was a saying that, when one's mastery of a weapon reached a certain level, said weapon would feel like an extension of one's own body. However, this was only a saying. Just being able to incorporate a weapon into one's own attack habits and styles was already an amazing feat. During the early stages of God's domain, the attributes of weapons and equipment were very important. However, as players acquired better equipment, they would begin ordering custom-made weapons and equipment for themselves. Even if 2 items possessed the exact same attributes, most players would choose equipment custom-made to their requirements over the other. Why was this so? The reason was very simple. The far greater ease of harmonization to their habits and styles. For this reason alone, players were willing to spend as much money as necessary. If a player possessed a high compatibility rate with the weapons they wielded, their attacks would flow much more smoothly. Most importantly, a weapon with good compatibility could improve a player's skill completion rate. This was also the reason why, during the later stages of the game, many players chose to discard ready-made epic weapons and, instead, were adamant in paying an astronomical sum to hire a master or grandmaster forger to produce a custom-made epic weapon for themselves. It was all because custom-made weapons and equipment possessed a much higher compatibility rate. Thinking up to this point, Xueqi immediately began brandishing the Abyssal Blade to get used to the newly enhanced weapon. He then found a level 35 demonic hound to test his sword on. Chop. Usually, Xueqi could achieve a completion rate of 85% or above when using this skill, displaying 100% of the skill's might. In the past, his best record for chop was 90%. Although this skill was very simple, it was extremely difficult to execute properly. The 3 sword lights, which should have resembled 3 silver crescents, converged into one as they struck at the demonic hound, causing the damage dealt by Chop to reach its maximum. At this moment, however, the 3 sword lights had transformed into 3 full moons that met at a single point. The space at the single point looked as if it had been pierced. One could faintly see a small spatial crack at this location. System: Chop completion rate 92%, resulting in 125% of skills effect. Skill proficiency +4. Xueqi then followed up with Thunder Flame Explosion. Originally, this skill should have combined the power of lightning and fire into a massive fireball that bombarded the enemy. Now, however, instead of a fireball. System: Thunder Flame Explosion completion rate 90%, resulting in 110% of skills effect. Skill proficiency +3. What? Why is there suddenly such a huge increase in skill completion rate? Xueqi stared at the system notification window, flabbergasted. Compared to his past self, his current strength was much stronger. In the past, his best record for Chop was 90% completion rate. Although it was only a meager 2% increase, the gap was like the difference between heaven and earth. Based on the system's configuration, completion rates between 81% to 90% were categorized into the same group. Achieving any percentage within this range would give an increase of 3 proficiency points. Also, at 90%, one could display 110% of a skills effect. At 91%, a skills effect was directly upgraded to 120% and would yield 4 proficiency points. The improvement to Thunder Flame Explosion was even more apparent. Previously, he could not even achieve an 85% completion rate on the skill. Now, however, he had managed 90%. Xueqi had killed a level 35 demonic hound in just 2 moves. It's no wonder many had said magic weapons possessed frightening power, and many experts could not bring themselves to divest their magic weapons in the past. So this was the case. Xueqi's heart was pounding madly as he looked at the level 35 demonic hound he had just annihilated. His compatibility with the Abyssal Blade right now was practically perfect. He felt invincible. Chapter 582. The True Power of a Magic Weapon. Xueqi killed over a dozen level 35 demonic hounds, testing his various skills. When used with the Abyssal Blade, he could manipulate every skill of his as if just playing with a toy. He could casually mold the skill to his liking, very easily his past records of skill completion rates. In God's domain, skill completion rates were an important indicator of a player's actual strength. In the past, in order to improve the completion rate of one skill by just 1%, many players had trained arduously for days, sometimes even weeks. Particularly, after reaching the 85% threshold, raising a skill's completion rate by 1% required a tremendous amount of effort. For some, even that wasn't enough. All the training in the world was useless. However, with the Abyssal Blade in hand, this ironclad law was instantly broken. When one wanted to improve their combat techniques, they first needed to learn how to control their own bodies. If one could not even control their form properly, they could never control the weapons in their hands. Xueqi's control over his body had long since reached a very high standard. Unfortunately, he had not reached a similar level with his control over his weapons. He could not reach a level where he could feel even a strand of hair fall onto his sword's edge. However, his compatibility with the Abyssal Blade now was practically perfect. It felt as if he had become one with the magic weapon, allowing his skill completion rate to reach new highs. At this moment, he surpassed all previous records with one of his basic skills, Chop, achieving a 95% completion rate. If a skill's completion rate reached 95%, the skill would display 135% of its effects. In other words, Xueqi's current Chop dealt an additional 35% damage compared to his previous 85% completion rate. The increase in combat power was obvious. After continuously using the newly improved Abyssal Blade for such a long time, Xueqi had grown addicted to the sensation he received from the magic weapon and the pleasure he felt from his strength gradually rising with every passing moment. His heart ached to remain in this state forever. After killing dozens of demonic hounds, Xueqi's hunger was unsated. He wanted to continue to utilize these demonic hounds to improve his completion rate. Unfortunately, time was of the essence. He needed to prioritize his quest for now. In the past, many of those who obtained magic weapons had told others not to involve themselves with these things as the magic weapon's power would devour them. So, It turns out that the power they had referred to was not a magic weapon's powerful attributes. Xueqi inwardly sighed as he looked at the abyssal blade in his hand. In the past, countless experts had trained arduously just so that they could increase their skill completion rate by just one more percentage. Some had even gone through all that effort for nothing. Yet, a magic weapon can achieve this feat easily. Moreover, as a magic weapon grows more powerful, this frightening compatibility rate will also intensify. This is the reason that players in the past had continued to upgrade their magic weapons, and as a result, drown themselves in the sea of skill completion rates, unable to pull themselves from the allure of this power. Thus far, Xueqi had only trained for half an hour or so, and already, his stagnant skill completion rates had improved massively. Moreover, Xueqi could clearly feel that he had yet to reach his limit. Such power was truly terrifying. This was a temptation that no expert could distance themselves from. After all, there was not a single expert that did not wish to further refine their own techniques, particularly in this virtual world that was filled with various chance encounters. Even Xueqi, someone who had played God's Domain for over a decade, hungered to upgrade the Abyssal Blade once more, improving the magic weapon's compatibility rate again. This way, he might be able to refine his skill completion rate further. Achieving a 95% completion rate had already increased his combat power by 35%. Every 1% past 90% could increase a skill's effect significantly, not to mention past 95%. At that time, just how terrifying would his skills become? It might even be possible to double his combat power. The impact of raising his skill completion rates was far more valuable than learning a single taboo skill. After all, a taboo skill was only one attack. Although its might surpassed skills of the same tier, what would happen the taboo skill's duration? In the end, he would return to his prior strength. Meanwhile, a player normally incorporated a variety of basic skills into their attacks when engaged in battle. If every skill could achieve a 100% completion rate, one could easily wipe the floor with a player that had learned a taboo skill of the same tier. This was the true power of a magic weapon. Its main purpose lay not in increasing its wielder's attributes, but rather, its main function was to improve the fundamentals of a player's techniques. Not even fragmented legendary weapons could offer such a devastating benefit, much less epic weapons. In the past, every player that wielded a magic weapon was undoubtedly a top-tier expert. Some even stood at God's Domain's peak. Xueqi finally understood that their achievements were all due to the intense compatibility rates that magic weapons offered. Of course, this improvement method was more of a form of diabolism. After all, most of the apex experts of God's Domain had attained their strength step by step. They had first trained their physical control to the very limit. They then focused on their control over their weapons. Apex experts like these possessed unshakable foundations. Even if they switched to new weapons and equipment, their strength would not decrease significantly and would soon recover. However, it was a different story for magic weapon wielders. For those who had obtained a magic weapon at the very start of the game, if they suddenly lost their magic weapons, their strength would plummet. Someone who had initially been an apex expert might instantly become a nobody. Hence, in the past, none of the wielders were willing to part with their magic weapons. As a result, their magic weapons eventually devoured them, and they were forced to start all over again. However, this inspired an idea in Xueqi. If he wanted to nurture experts quickly, it would be best to start with searching for weapons with high compatibility rates. If a player possessed weapons or piece of equipment that was highly compatible, their strength would skyrocket. Currently, Zero Wing had extremely few top-tier experts, and the standard of the guild's elite members was still relatively low. Meanwhile, dungeons required very high levels of personal strength. Zero Wing's advantage of raiding speed was only due to the equipment its team wore. In truth, they were far weaker than those teams that relied on personal combat techniques. The dungeon's final boss was particularly challenging for Zero Wing. There was practically no way to improve the equipment of Zero Wing's core members any further at the moment. If they wished to increase their combat power, they could only do so through skill completion rates. Unfortunately, until now, Zero Wing's members had only focused on finding ways to obtain better weapons and equipment to increase their attributes. They had mostly neglected to improve their skill completion rates. Currently, even Fire Dance, the most powerful melee fighter on Zero Wing's core team, could only achieve a maximum skill completion rate of 80%. She was still a great distance away from reaching 85%. If he could improve Fire Dance and the others' compatibility rates with their weapons, the combat power of Zero Wing's core team would improve by leaps and bounds. Compatibility rate? Xueqi pondered aloud. In fact, he did have a method that could improve one's compatibility rate. He could recruit a Master Forger into the guild. Although Master Forgers could not produce a weapon with a 100% compatibility rate with a player, if Zero Wing had a Master Forger, said Forger could, more or less, produce tailor-made weapons and equipment with slightly higher compatibility rates for some of the guild's members. This would help the guild's experts massively. Only, nurturing a Master Forger was easier said than done. Xueqi no longer wasted time as he sheathed the Abyssal Blade and made his way to Gloomy Valley. Grey mist shrouded Gloomy Valley all year round, limiting players' vision as they explored the area. Moreover, Xueqi could feel the grey mist suppressing all 5 of his senses while he wandered the valley. It was as if he stood deep within the blood mist of the Demonkin army's killing intent. Only, the suppression effects were much weaker here. The majority of the monsters inside Gloomy Valley were level 40 or above elite rank. There were also plenty of level 40 or above special elites roaming around. Even the outermost region of the valley was a challenge to get through. Meanwhile, in Gloomy Valley's inner region, the level 40 Great Lord Noya stood guard at the gate leading to the next map. If one wished to journey to the new map, they first needed to kill Noya. That's Noya? Sure enough, it's strong. Xueqi hid in the forest as he observed the massive gargoyle in front of the valley's entrance. Noya, Demonic Great Lord. Level 40. HP 10, 000, 000/10, 000, 000. Chapter 583. Suppressing a Great Lord. To current players, a level 40 demonic Great Lord was a nightmare. Noya was also a gargoyle. Among demonic creatures, gargoyles ranked at the top in terms of magic resistance and defense. Worse, gargoyles possessed a massive pair of wings that enabled them to soar through the sky. If players encountered one, they would not even have the chance to escape. Gargoyles could also attack from the sky, leaving melee players at a great disadvantage. Only ranged classes posed any threat to gargoyles. A black slate tablet was embedded into the towering gate that Great Lord Noya protected. A faint gray barrier also prevented anyone from reaching the gate. Meanwhile, demonic power filled that black slate tablet. It was none other than the chapter of darkness that Xueqi was trying to obtain. It was also the core energy source for the barrier protecting the stone gate. If one wanted to obtain the chapter of darkness, not only were they required to defend themselves against the gargoyles' attacks, but they also had to break the barrier. It was practically impossible for anyone to obtain the chapter of darkness without killing the Great Lord Noya. Only after defeating the gargoyle could one attempt to break the gray barrier. As Xueqi approached the gate stealthily, he could faintly hear noise from nearby, and he turned to look for the source. Why are players here at such a time? Xueqi was surprised. A short distance from the massive stone gate, a team of 100 players with levels ranging from 28 to 29 slowly approached, seemingly intending to raid the Great Lord. The sky grew darker by the minute, and it wouldn't be long before night arrived. To players, this was an extremely unfavorable situation. Ordinary players would normally hurry back to their respective shelters at this time of day. Are they planning to raid Noya now? Xueqi could not help his shock. At this moment, this team of 100 players had already spread out and moved into formation. It was obvious that they intended to raid Noya. Only, a level 40 field Great Lord was not an easy opponent. Even a 500-strong team would face one ending, death. Otherwise, District 5 would not have joined hands with several other districts in an attempt to raid Noya. Meanwhile, the Crusading army, which several shelters had organized, consisted of 1,000 players. Of course, this did not mean that all 1,000 players would enter the battle simultaneously. Instead, they planned to use a rotational tactic, taking turns to wear out the Great Lord. Field bosses would grow stronger depending on the number of players within their area of influence. For a Great Lord like Noya, when that number exceeded 100, its HP, defense, and attack power would increase significantly. Hence, when fighting a field Great Lord, it was ideal to send a team of 100 players or have several teams of 100 players rotate in and out of battle. This was also the method that guilds favored when dealing with field bosses. Watching the 100 players stand before Noya, One could easily tell that they were not ordinary players based on their levels. In District 5, level 28 or 29 players stood at the peak of the shelter, yet there were actually 100 such players here right now. However, against a level 40 Great Lord, this team was still far from enough. Go! As the leading elementalist shouted, the 12 elementalists that had surrounded the gargoyle promptly unfurled the magic scrolls in their hands and began chanting. These 12 magic scrolls seemed to be of one body as they formed a complex 12-star magic array. In the blink of an eye, this 12-star magic array enveloped the Great Lord Noya. Powerful elemental mana continuously suppressed the field boss, who stood in this array's center, causing the Great Lord to release an angry bellow. Humans! It's you damned humans again! I'll sacrifice you all to Lord Carlo. Despite the 12-star magic array, Noya still revealed a sinister smile. You can smile even in the face of death, the leading elementalist sneered. Everyone, attack! With the demon suppressing barrier in effect, it won't be able to display even 1/10 of its strength. The chapter of darkness is fated to belong to District 1 this time. Everyone nodded in agreement as they charged towards the Great Lord. The people from District 1 are insane. Xueqi silently clicked his tongue. Although he had heard that District 1 was the most powerful shelter in the Dark Den, trying to raid a Great Lord using such a brute force method was clearly not a wise move. Just like the leading elementalist had said, a demon-suppressing array formed by the power of 12 elementalists was indeed powerful. Even a peerless Great Lord could only display about 1/10 of its strength while contained in this barrier. With this, their MTs could definitely tank a level 40 Great Lord. However, the demon-suppressing array required 12 elementalists to maintain it. Moreover, the barrier took an immense toll on the elementalist's mana. If even one elementalist ran out of mana, the barrier would immediately crumble. Normally, only teams that were extremely confident in their DPS would attempt this method. After all, after one took into account the slots for MTs and healers, there were only 70 or so slots for DPS classes on a 100-player team. Losing another 12 core damage dealers would greatly affect the team's overall damage. Particularly, the abilities of the team's DPS were further put to the test when one considered the problem of the barrier's duration. Following which, the 6 MTs of District 1 took turns receiving the Noya's attacks. With the rear line healers healing them, the MTs managed to stop the gargoyle's fierce attacks easily. At the same time, the other DPS of the team also began to attack the Great Lord madly. Fireballs, frost arrows, all sorts of magical and physical attacks bombarded Noya. Although the Great Lord's strength had been suppressed, greatly weakening its attack power and defense, the players of District 1 could not inflict enough damage. The highest damage they dealt did not even exceed -1,000. Damn! Why does this monster have so much defense? The leading elementalist frowned. Gritting his teeth he shouted, "Move on to Plan B." Immediately, a cursemancer began chanting an incantation. The spell this cursemancer used was one that Xueqi was very familiar with. It was none other than the Tier 1 curse that Iron Wrist's party had used, Dark Storm. Not only could it inflict large amounts of damage, but it could also heavily injure its target, greatly reducing the target's defense. When Dark Storm struck Noya, damages of over -3,000 points appeared above its head, one after another. The Tier 1 curse only dealt a total damage of around -10,000 points to the Great Lord. To Noya, who possessed 10 million HP, this was not even a scratch. Following which, everyone's damage abruptly soared, and many dealt over -1,000 with their attacks. Unfortunately, the duration of Dark Storm's effect was limited. A short moment later, everyone's damage fell. Next, the leading elementalist shouted. Another cursemancer began chanting, similarly casting the Tier 1 curse, Dark Storm. In such a way, the team repeatedly cast Tier 1 curses at Noya. Eventually, the gargoyle's HP fell to 60%. What an amazing team! Not even Zero Wings core team is capable of wearing out a level 40 Great Lord to such a degree. Xueqi was quite surprised as he watched this scene. However, he was also pleased. Initially, he had struggled to think of a way to break the Grey Barrier. However, now that someone pinned down the Great Lord for him, he could head over to the barrier and take his time researching it. Chapter 584. What can you do to me? While Xueqi slowly circled to the other side of the battlefield, Great Lord Noya's HP suddenly decreased rapidly. This decrease could clearly be seen with the naked eye. At this moment, Noya was losing 1% of its HP every second. This sudden decrease was even greater than the damage that the District 1 team managed to cause. Is it nighttime already? The leading elementalist lifted his head to look up at the gloomy sky. The moon had already emerged. As moonlight touched on the Great Lord, Noya began to change. Its originally massive 3-story tall body began to shrink rapidly, and its maximum HP fell from its original 10 million to 6 million. However, as the gargoyle's body shrunk, its strength continuously rose, the Great Lord's damage increasing as well. Initially, Noya had only dealt around -2,000 to -3,000 to District 1's MTs. Now, however, every attack dealt over -4,000 damage. The MTs receiving the Great Lord's attacks had more than 8,000 HP. Before, even if they were unlucky enough to receive a critical hit from the Great Lord, they would still live. Now, however, a critical hit would definitely kill an MT. Take turns activating your life-saving skills to tank the boss. Healers, concentrate on the lead MT. The leading elementalist commanded. He had long since prepared for this. Following which, one of the shield warriors activated a Tier 1 shield wall, reducing the damage he received by half for 20 seconds. The damage Noya dealt instantly fell from nearly -5,000 points to just over -2,000 points. Meanwhile, the healers at the rear began dumping heals on the shield warrior, easily replenishing the 2,000 plus HP the shield warrior lost. However, after 5 seconds or so, the shield warrior suddenly struggled to cope with the Great Lord's attacks. The damage Noya's attacks dealt suddenly increased from over -2,000 points to almost -4,000. If not for shield wall, the shield warrior might have lost his life instantly. Leader, Noya is more powerful than we thought. If its damage continues rising, our MTs won't last, a female cleric said hurriedly. Since the battle had begun, the healers had not struggled to keep the team's MTs alive. They had also specifically chosen this time to challenge Noya. Based on their previous observations, Noya's HP during daytime was simply too high. When the sun set, however, the gargoyle's HP fell from 10 million to 6 million, though its damage would soar in return. With their team's damage output, if Noya had 10 million HP, they could defeat the Great Lord within the demon-suppressing barrier's duration. So, they could only give the 6 million HP Noya a try. Also, the longer Noya fought at night, the higher its damage became. Hence, they had chosen to challenge Noya near twilight. Only, the Great Lord's damage scaling exceeded their initial estimations. Damn! Its damage is increasing far too quickly. The leading elementalist glanced at his own remaining mana. At most, the demon-suppressing barrier would last a few more minutes. Currently, however, Noya still had more than 3 million HP. It was impossible for their team to deal that much damage in such a short time. Gritting his teeth, he yelled, "Retreat!" Soon, everyone began to back away from the gargoyle in an organized retreat. The lead MT also began retreating from the barrier one step at a time. Not only could the demon-suppressing barrier suppress demonic creatures, but it also limited a demon's range of activity. Only, while no one repelled Noya, the gargoyle was able to attack the barrier freely. The damage the barrier received rapidly depleted the 12 elementalists' mana. By the time everyone left the barrier, Noya's eyes narrowed as it revealed a cold smile. The gargoyle then roared. Suddenly, Noya's body cracked, some fragments falling from its body. These fragments then transformed into more than a dozen miniature Noyas that were as tall as a normal person. However, these miniature Noyas were no trivial monsters. Although each only had 200,000 HP, they were all level 40 chieftain-ranked monsters. Immediately, these monsters bombarded the demon-suppressing barrier with attacks, and in just 5 seconds, the 12 elementalists lost their remaining mana. As a result, the demon-suppressing barrier crumbled. These Lord-ranked Noyas then spread their wings, soaring into the air as they chased after the withdrawing players. For monsters capable of flight, it was child's play to chase players who fled on foot. After a short moment, the gargoyles caught up to the escaping players of District 1, engaging in a skirmish. With one attack, these miniature Noyas dealt over -3,000 damage to the team's MTs. As for those who weren't plate armor classes, most were instantly killed. These miniature Noyas' damage practically rivaled Lord-ranked monsters. Damn! They're just chieftains. Why are their attacks so powerful? A guardian knight shouted, complaining as he was beaten to death by 3 miniature Noyas. Not even the team's healers could keep him alive. In just a moment, the team of 100 lost 7 of its members. Meanwhile, the Great Lord Noya simply remained in front of the massive stone gate, protecting the Chapter of Darkness while watching the members of District 1 die one by one. If a team of 100 had to face over a dozen chieftains, each with an attack power that could rival a Lord-ranked monster, the team had no chance of survival. This Great Lord is really powerful. It also knows the split skill. With this skill, there is no point in fighting a rotational battle. Xueqi, who had been watching the battle from a short distance away, silently clicked his tongue. Split was a skill that allowed a monster to split into many weaker versions of itself. If players did not kill these doppelgangers in time, these doppelgangers would become nutrients for the main body, recovering large amounts of HP. It was one of the most annoying skills a boss could possess. If a great lord like Noya possessed this skill, a rotational battle would be useless. It was simply impossible for a team of 100 players to defeat so many chieftains in time. No matter how many players a team swapped, the result would not change. However, Split was not without a weakness. After using Split, Noya's main form would not be able to attack, making it a perfect chance to damage the Great Lord. However, the raid team needed to be able to annihilate all the doppelgangers in time. Otherwise, there was no point in attacking the main body as Noya could recover the lost HP by absorbing its doppelgangers. Now that Noya's doppelgangers were chasing District 1's players, Xueqi dashed towards the Grey Barrier. Despicable human! You dare think of stealing the Chapter of Darkness! Noya bellowed as it discovered Xueqi standing before the Grey Barrier. Xueqi responded to the Great Lord with a sideways glance that said, "What can you do to me?" Following which, Xueqi ignored Noya as he began attacking the Grey Barrier. At this moment, Noya could only watch helplessly. As long as its doppelgangers were still alive, Noya's main body was unable to move or attack. This was the rule of the split skill, and not even a Great Lord could break this rule. As Xueqi swung the Abyssal blade, multiple silver blades of light that could cut even space itself bombarded the Grey Barrier. Boom! 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 After over a dozen consecutive hits, cracks began to appear on the Grey Barrier. Unfortunately, these cracks began healing at a rate visible to the naked eye, taking only moments to disappear. Interesting. Xueqi's eyes glowed. Immediately, Xueqi launched a fierce assault on the barrier, his attack rate continuously increasing. There were 2 methods to break a barrier. One was through deciphering, while the other was through brute force. However, the latter method required a very high strength. Without having a certain amount of strength, all attacks against the barrier would be useless. It was simply impossible for players at Xueqi's level to force their way through this Grey Barrier. They could only think of a way to decipher it. However, Xueqi was different. Currently, the Abyssal Blade was as strong as an epic weapon. Xueqi also possessed the fragmented legendary ranked Heavenly Dragon's Breath and the epic ranked 7 Luminaries Ring. Furthermore, he wore the Tier 1 set equipment for swordsmen. His attributes far surpassed ordinary players of the same levels. Despicable! Lowly ant, cease your actions! Noya's eyes turned crimson as it began to panic. However, as its doppelgangers were still around, it was unable to take action against Xueqi. It could only watch as Xueqi damaged the Grey Barrier. Despite the Chapter of Darkness supplying an endless stream of power, the barrier's self-repair speed could not keep up with Xueqi's damage. As a result, more and more cracks started appearing on the Grey Barrier. As the cracks expanded and were about to cover the entire barrier. "Human, you have truly angered me now." Noya released a frightening roar. In the next moment, the doppelgangers that had chased the members of District 1 collapsed, one after another. That's right, collapsed, not absorbed. Noya cancelled Split midway through the skill's duration. Leaping into the air, the gargoyle flew towards Xueqi. At this moment, a pitch-black scythe suddenly appeared in Noya's hand. Countless wraiths emitted ear-piercing screeches that echoed throughout the valley as they writhed on the snow-white blade of this scythe. Arriving before Xuefeng, Noya swung its scythe towards the despicable little ant. The scythe transformed into a black fissure that was as fine as a hair. This fissure was a phenomenon caused due to the scythe's blade slicing apart space. It was as if space had been cut into two. This black fissure extended towards Xuefeng. Chapter 585. Perfect Skill. Although Xuefeng had bombarded the Grey Barrier all this time, his attention never once left the Great Lord Noya. High-ranking bosses in God's domain possessed very high intelligence. In a desperate situation, they were capable of carrying out actions that surpassed one's imaginations. Forcefully canceling Split caused a massive backlash. Initially, Noya still had over 3 million HP. Now, however, it only had over 2 million HP. Moreover, it was obvious that, overall, the gargoyle had weakened significantly. This great lord is simply insane. Cold sweat slid down Xuefeng's back as he looked at the black fissure extending towards him. This move was the Tier 3 taboo skill, Dark Annihilation, and it was a skill known for having the highest single target attack power among all Tier 3 skills. Its might could rival even the Tier 4 skill, Dimensional Slash. It was a frightening skill that could only be dodged, not blocked. However, as Dark Annihilation was a very powerful skill, its user would also receive a strong backlash that would place them in a weakened state for a long time. Xuefeng had not expected the Great Lord to be so decisive. First, it forcefully cancelled Split. Now, it even used a Tier 3 taboo skill. Without hesitation, Xuefeng immediately switched to the Aura of Earth and activated Absolute Defense, becoming invincible for 5 seconds. Immediately, a golden barrier appeared around Xuefeng's body. The instant the black fissure collided with this barrier, the impact sent Xuefeng flying. He felt as if he had just been struck by a truck. Xuefeng flew over 20 yards through the air, his body slamming into a cliff. However, Noya was far from done with its attack. The gargoyle continued to brandish its scythe, sending a stream of black fissures striking at Xuefeng, who was embedded inside the cliff. Dark Annihilation was not a one-off skill. Rather, the skill functioned to enhance its user's attacks for a certain amount of time. After suffering over a dozen attacks, the cliff collapsed, transforming into neatly cut gravel that exploded in all directions. This sensational scene stupefied the players of District 1, who currently watched from afar. Compared to their prior battle with Noya, Xuefeng's battle with the Great Lord was on an entirely different level. If Noya had used this move against them, it would have wiped them out instantly. They would not have had a chance. Damn! That gargoyle had actually been toying with us. The leading elementalist tightly gripped his staff, feeling humiliated. Leader, this is weird. Why is Noya attacking a cliff instead of us? What's going on here? A level 29 shield warrior asked curiously. Has Noya gone insane? That's not it. I've already used Eagle Eyes to take a look. Noya is currently attacking a swordsman player, a ranger explained. This swordsman sure is dumb. He actually tried to steal the chapter of darkness while we fought Noya. Does he really think the gargoyle will let him steal the chapter so easily? If it were that simple, we would have done it long ago. Many players on the team began ridiculing Xuefeng's foolish actions. Alright, that's enough. Let's hurry and retreat. If Noya comes after us again, we will truly be finished, the leading elementalist said. Everyone nodded silently before escaping the valley. Despite their ridicule, they still felt very grateful towards Xuefeng. Just the brief battle against Noya's doppelgangers had reduced their numbers to less than 60. If things had dragged on, none of them would have walked out of here alive. As everyone turned to leave, the ranger who had previously used Eagle Eyes suddenly exclaimed, "Team leader Blue Frost, that swordsman is still alive." Alive? How can this be? Not even a shield warrior with protection blessing and shield wall can survive. How could a swordsman possibly live after that attack? The leading elementalist named Blue Frost could not bring himself to believe the ranger's words. It's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask the other rangers as well. The ranger replied, his shock clearly written all over his face. Curious, the other rangers also activated Eagle Eyes and looked towards the cliff. Immediately, they all found themselves tongue-tied. When Blue Frost saw the shocked expressions on the other rangers' faces, he had no choice but to believe it to be true. Who is that? Blue Frost could not help but ask. Against such an attack, their team of 100 could only embrace their deaths. It was simply impossible for them to block it. Yet, this mysterious swordsman had survived against that frightening power. In Blue Frost's memory, a person with such capabilities did not exist. Even those mavericks he knew of were incapable of doing so. At this moment, Xueqi slowly stepped away from the broken cliff, his HP holding steady at 100%. Such frightening power. Xueqi stretched, the bones all over his body cracking and popping. After receiving over a dozen dark annihilation attacks, he felt as if his entire body was about to fall apart. If not for the invincible effect of absolute defense, he would be a dead man by now. In God's domain, attack and defense skills were not absolute. In front of absolute power, even invulnerability was useless. Fortunately, absolute defense was not a skill that current bosses could overcome. If he had chosen to use parry or defensive blade, he would most likely be dead. Seeing Xueqi still alive, Noya's anger burned even brighter. Ignoring its weakened body, the Great Lord swung its scythe towards Xueqi, adamant in reaping the swordsman's life. You're still not giving up? Do you really think that I won't fight you? Xueqi frowned. Immediately, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power and Blade Liberation, jumping up to meet the gargoyle in battle. Even if the Great Lord were in peak condition, Xueqi would still be confident of putting up a good fight. Heavenly Dragon's power increased Xueqi's strength attribute by 100%, and defense and HP by 300%. Immediately, Xueqi's HP broke past 30,000. His defense climbed to more than double that of an MT of the same level. As for Blade Liberation, when the skill was used on the level 30 Abyssal Blade, Xueqi's strength increased by 90%. His agility also increased by 90%. Although Xueqi's body had not changed, the power within him right now resembled that of an ancient beast. The Abyssal Blade transformed into a streak of light as it struck the black scythe in Noya's hands. Boom! An explosion shook the air. Xueqi's attack grounded the level 40 Great Lord, forcing the gargoyle to retreat by 2 steps as it landed on the ground. The ground shattered with each step. In contrast, Xueqi managed to land effortlessly. Turning his feet slightly, he dashed towards the Great Lord. After activating Heavenly Dragon's power and Blade Liberation, Xueqi's mind experienced serenity and clarity like never before. As he arrived before Noya, he activated Purgatory's power, increasing both his attack speed and damage once more. His arm that held onto the Abyssal Blade then reflexively used Chop. 3 full silver moons struck Noya's body from 3 different directions. The Abyssal Blade instantly pierced Noya's skin, which was harder than steel. The Great Lord released an anguished cry as the force of the attack threw it backward, frightening damages appearing above his head, one after another. Minus 5,540. Minus 8,346. Minus 16,650. The final strike of Chop was even a critical hit. In total, Chop devoured more than 30,000 HP from Noya. System: Chop completion rate 98%, resulting in 160% of skills effect. Skill proficiency +4. Xueqi broke his previous record. Noya raged. It tried to counterattack, but unfortunately for the Great Lord, Xueqi had long since sensed its intentions. Shifting his body slightly, he easily dodged the gargoyle's claw. He then leaped into the air, tightening his grip on the Abyssal Blade. In the next moment, countless arcs of lightning and scorching flames emerged from the Abyssal Blade, which then transformed into a meteor that plummeted towards the Great Lord's head. Every movement had been fluid and natural. Xueqi felt as if he had gathered all his strength to a single point, the tip of his sword. The instant he swung the Abyssal Blade, he felt incomparable satisfaction. Although Noya tried to defend with its scythe, the spatial suppression of Thunderflame explosion caused the Great Lord's movements to turn sluggish. Noya could not keep up with the Abyssal Blade's descending speed at all. Boom! Fire and lightning consumed Noya. Minus 36,154. System: Thunderflame explosion completion rate 100%, resulting in 220% of skills effect. Skill proficiency +4. Is he human? The District 1 players who watched from afar were stupefied, shock filling their hearts. A player was actually capable of overwhelming a level 40 Great Lord all by himself. If others heard of this, nobody would believe such a tale. Yet, that was exactly the situation they had just witnessed. Chapter 586. Creating a Legend. Leader, who is that? The vice leader of the team, a beautiful level 29 female cleric named Evening Lotus, could not help but ask as she looked to Blue Frost. Blue Frost was the #1 player in District 1. Not only were his combat techniques excellent, but he also possessed plenty of contacts. He knew a lot of experts and even a few rarely seen mavericks. Moreover, he had been a beta tester of God's Domain before the game had launched. Out of all of the players of the available shelters, nobody was more familiar with God's Domain than Blue Frost. I wish to know that as well, Blue Frost replied, smiling bitterly as he shook his head. None of the experts I know of are capable of reaching such a standard. Just a single attack from Xueqi had managed to cause over -30,000 damage to Noya. Xueqi's damage could already rival the damage of their entire 100-man team. The difference between them was inconceivable. Blue Frost recognized himself as one of the players standing at the top of God's Domain. However, after experiencing Xueqi's power, he finally realized that there would always be a sky above the clouds. It would be great if we can befriend him. Such an expert will definitely be one of God's Domain's leading figures in the future. If we can become friends with him, it could massively help our District 1's shelter, Evening Lotus stated. Indeed. If we can recruit such an expert into our shelter, we will become one of the strongest shelters out there. Blue Frost nodded in agreement. Their District 1 was only considered the top shelter in this region. However, that was not the case when they included other regions. Currently, players could only travel to their desired destinations using their own 2 feet. Their range of activities could not extend past a single region. Hence, for now, exchanges between different regions were very inconvenient. However, that story would change once other forms of transportation appeared. When movement between regions became more convenient, more competition would certainly greet them. Naturally, their District 1 would no longer be the strongest shelter. If they had an expert like Xueqi supporting them when such a time arrived, the position of their shelter could rise significantly. Leader, what are we going to do now? Leave? Or, Evening Lotus asked. Currently, Xueqi still fought an intense battle against Noya. If they joined the battlefield now, it would look like they were trying to take advantage of the situation. If that happened, rather than finding friendship with Xueqi, they would become enemies instead. Isn't it obvious? We wait, Blue Frost said very definitively. Wouldn't it be a pity if we lost the chance to befriend such an impressive expert? We have the perfect opportunity to do so right now. Although he is very powerful, he must have used some sort of berserk skill to achieve such strength. Such skills won't have a long duration. Sooner or later, he will have to escape. At that time, if we lend him a helping hand, won't it be easy to get acquainted with him? Evening Lotus nodded in agreement after hearing these words. Mavericks were very arrogant. Normally, they did not bother with people like them. Hence, it was not easy to befriend a maverick. However, if they sacrificed themselves to save Xueqi, even a powerful maverick like him would be willing to get to know them. Hearing Blue Frost's words, the other members of the team also expressed their agreement. It was not easy to earn the favor of a maverick. It was especially true for a maverick like Xueqi. If they could get such an expert to owe them a favor, they would not mind suffering some deaths or injuries. Hence, everyone quickly started to prepare. As soon as Xueqi turned to flee, they would move in to hinder the Great Lord. Currently, Xueqi had no idea what was going on around him. He was already intoxicated with the feeling from his previous attack. Is this what a 100% completion rate feels like? Xueqi looked at the abyssal blade in his hand in disbelief, his mind recalling the previous attack. Since he had begun playing God's Domain, this was the first time he had achieved a 100% skill completion rate. The sensation was simply wondrous. As a result of Thunderflame Explosion achieving a 100% completion rate, the skill displayed 220% of its effect. Although the skill's fainted effect was ineffective against the Great Lord, the gargoyle had received the movement speed reduction debuff in full. Moreover, due to Xueqi achieving a 100% skill completion rate, Noya's speed, which originally would have reduced to 1/6 of its normal speed, had now reduced to 1/13 of its original. The debuff's duration also lasted over a dozen seconds. Even if the Great Lord were at its peak, having its speed reduced to only 1/13 of its original would slow it to a turtle's pace, not to mention the current Noya, who had suffered 2 debuffs already. Noya's current attack and movement speeds were as effective as if it were in a fainted state. At this moment, even a level 1 could go up and give Noya a kick without dying. Xueqi also knew that this was a great opportunity that would not be available a second time. Currently, Noya only had 2 million HP remaining. Not only was it suffering from 2 weakening debuffs, but it had also received a Thunderflame explosion at 100% completion rate. Most importantly, Xueqi was at his peak. Finish it. This thought suddenly emerged in Xueqi's mind. Originally, Xueqi had intended to drive off Noya temporarily before shifting his focus to breaking the Grey Barrier. However, the rare opportunity before him was simply too tempting. That was a Field Great Lord. Even the loot of an ordinary Field Lord was astounding, with fine gold equipment being the most common among the drops. If one were lucky, they could even obtain dark gold equipment. Meanwhile, High Lords had a very high possibility of dropping dark gold equipment. As for Great Lords, they would drop dark gold equipment with 100% certainty, and there was even a good chance of epic items dropping. Even if no epic items dropped, there would still be forging designs, recipes, and materials of equal value. In the past, even after sacrificing thousands of lives to kill a Great Lord of the same level, a guild would still profit. One could just imagine how frightening a Great Lord's value was. Currently, a greatly weakened level 40 Great Lord stood before him. How could he let such a golden opportunity go? Without hesitation, Xueqi activated 9 Dragon Slash and Phantom Kill. He even activated Black Emperor, the trump card he had saved all this time. Blade Liberation's effect only lasted 20 seconds. After these 20 seconds, if he were still unable to kill Noya, he would have no choice but to give up and run. Hence, Xueqi decided to use all of his available skills. Immediately, Xueqi, his doppelganger, and the 12 Abyssal Blade Phantoms attacked Noya. With its speed reduced, Noya was incapable of resisting the attacks. However, Xueqi was still not satisfied. Pointing the Abyssal Blade towards the sky, he activated the magic weapon's newest skill, Abyssal Curse. Clouds of black mist suddenly covered the sky. These clouds then submerged themselves into Noya's body. Immediately, the gargoyle howled with anguish. Although a Great Lord possessed very high resistances, Abyssal Curse still managed to reduce 10% of Noya's attributes. As a result, not only did Noya's HP fall to 1,800,000, its defense also significantly decreased. At the same time, the 12 Abyssal Blade Phantoms assaulted the Great Lord with a constant stream of attacks. Each phantom dealt over -1,500 damage, -3,000 damage if it were a critical hit. Fortunately, the Abyssal Blade had a critical chance of 50%. In total, the 12 Abyssal Blades were capable of dealing up to -30,000 damage every second. There was even less need to mention Xueqi's doppelganger, who had activated Blade Liberation. Every casual attack from the doppelganger dealt over -3,000 damage, or over -6,000 damage if it was a critical hit. Including the damage from by various skills, the doppelganger's damage output was simply mind-blowing. The numerous critical hits allowed Xueqi to accumulate 30 stacks of death auras quickly. He also continuously utilized the death auras to reduce his skills' cooldowns. Although the death auras could only be used to reduce the cooldown of skills he had learned, it was still a very powerful effect. Take the Tier 1 chop for example. Xueqi could instantly remove the skill's cooldown by using a stack of death auras. As for skills such as Thunderflame Explosion and Thundering Flash, Xueqi could use them every 3 to 4 seconds. Every one of these skills could destroy more than 20,000 or 30,000 of Noya's HP. Moreover, Xueqi continued to hack at the Great Lord with the Abyssal Blade, devouring HP as the magic weapon's passive attribute quickly accumulated a bonus of 20% damage. As the recipient of these attacks, Noya's remaining 1,800,000 HP decreased at a rate visible to the naked eye. In total, the Great Lord lost around 90,000 HP every second. In 10 short seconds, Noya's HP fell below 1 million. However, Blade Liberation's duration was reaching its end. During Shifeng's initial collision with Noya, he had wasted nearly 1 second. Taking everything into account, he now had less than 9 seconds to finish Noya off. Blade Liberation had a very powerful backlash. Once the skill's duration ended, Shifeng's attributes would instantly reduce by 80%. At that time, even if Noya only had several tens of thousands of HP remaining, the Great Lord could easily kill him. Bring it on. Shifeng gritted his teeth. Right now, he was in a race against time. Suddenly, Shifeng sucked in a mouthful of air as he activated Dragon Breath. A white beam lanced through the Great Lord Noya, causing critical damage of over -50,000 points. Shifeng immediately followed up with a firestorm. With both Heavenly Dragon's power and Blade Liberation activated, Firestorm's power became even more frightening. Dragons of fire descended from the sky, one after another, completely devouring the level 40 gargoyle and turning the Great Lord's surroundings into a sea of flames. Meanwhile, damages of over -30,000, and even -60,000, points appeared on Noya's head. Firestorm lasted a full 5 seconds. During this time, Shifeng continued his relentless assault on the Great Lord. When only 4 seconds were left on Blade Liberation, Noya still had 500,000 HP. The final strike. Flame burst. Shifeng shouted, the Abyssal blade instantly transforming into a miniature sun. At this time, Shifeng's doppelganger had similarly activated Flame Burst. Shifeng then activated Divine Providence, a faint golden glow suddenly enveloping his body. Knowing that death was already on its doorstep, Noya's eyes suddenly glowed a bloody red. It had actually managed to break free from the movement speed reduction debuff and brandished its scythe at Shifeng. Every strike from the scythe seemed capable of cutting apart space itself. This was also the last skill in Noya's arsenal, the Tier 2 taboo skill, Death's Tribute. This move was a domain skill, and it was capable of causing horrific amounts of damage to enemies within a certain range. Upon Death's Tribute's activation, the area 50 yards around Noya turned deathly silent. Wraiths and evil spirits began to emerge from the ground. There were also dark blades moving through the area, and anything that came into contact with these blades immediately turned into sand and dirt. What kind of battle is this? Evening Lotus was shocked as she watched the battle from afar. On one side, there was the sun. On the other, the end of the world had arrived. If players like them participated in this battle, they would die instantly, without even ash remaining of their bodies. Die! At this moment, Shifeng couldn't care less what the Great Lord was trying to do. Without hesitation, he dove straight into Death Tribute's domain. If he did not fight now, once Blade Liberation's time was up, he would not be a match for the Great Lord. 24 consecutive strikes. One after another, miniature suns melded into the darkness of Death's Tribute. In the next moment, Shifeng and his doppelganger struck the Great Lord Noya a total of 24 times, each strike accurately hitting Noya's weak points. Every one of Shifeng's attacks dealt over -20,000 damage and -40,000 with a critical hit. As for the doppelganger, every one of its attacks dealt over -10,000 damage and -20,000 if it were a critical hit. In the blink of an eye, 24 dazzling blades of light illuminated the gloomy valley. Noya's remaining 500,000 HP plunged to zero, frustration filling the gargoyle's eyes as its body fell to the ground. At this moment, Shifeng also knelt. His complexion was deathly pale. Fresh blood covered his entire body as if he had just taken a dip in a gory pool. As for his remaining HP, he had less than 500. Chapter 587. Frightening Harvest of a Great Lord. He won? Blue Frost and the others, who had waited patiently for the time to save Shifeng, were dumbfounded. They could not bring themselves to believe what their eyes had just witnessed. A single player had actually defeated a level 40 Great Lord. Although they had seen other mavericks defeat the monsters serving as gatekeepers to new maps, that was in the past. The monsters those mavericks had gone up against had merely been lords. A Great Lord, on the other hand, was on a completely different level. This fact had been reinforced after they witnessed Noya's ultimate move, Death's Tribute. Everything within 50 yards of the Great Lord had turned into sand and dirt. No living creature could survive in that domain. Isn't that person way too powerful? He actually survived the Great Lord's ultimate move. Just how high are his HP and defense? A level 29 shield warrior exclaimed. Back when the shield warrior had received Noya's normal attack, despite having activated shield wall, he had still received over -4,000 damage. If he had not possessed shield wall's 50% damage reduction effect, he would have died on the spot. Shield warriors and guardian knights wielded shields. Not only could one's shield increase a player's defense, but they also possessed a block rate. It was why these two classes could serve as a team's MTs. However, Noya's Death's Tribute was not a normal attack. It was a powerful AoE skill. Yet, Xueqi had still managed to survive after receiving it. His defense and HP were inconceivable. In reality, Xueqi was also rejoicing. He truly had not expected to survive Noya's last attack. The power of the Tier 2 taboo skill, Death's Tribute, was no joke. Even against a player of the same level, their chances of survival were practically nil. It was the same even if said player was an MT who had activated a life-saving skill. Although Heavenly Dragon's power increased both his defense and HP by 300%, the might of a Tier 2 taboo skill rivaled that of a Tier 3 skill. Defeating a mere Tier 1 player like himself would be child's play for Noya. Even a Tier 2 player would be badly crippled if they managed to survive. With the remaining 30,000 HP he had at the time, he should have had no chance of surviving the ordeal. Xueqi could only think of one reason for his miraculous survival. Magic resistance. Death's Tribute was an attack that combined both physical and magical damage, with magical damage as the main component. Meanwhile, his high magic resistance had negated a large amount of the taboo skill's magical damage, and as a result, allowed him to survive. Leader, are we still going over to meet him? Evening Lotus asked after recovering from her stupor. Yes. Of course, we're going. He has just achieved such a feat, and we are the witnesses of this legend. How can we not go and congratulate him? At this moment, Blue Frost's eyes were filled with reverence as he looked at Xueqi. To them, a great lord was an immovable mountain. Blue Frost even had yet to hear of anyone throughout God's domain overcoming this mountain. Yet, the man before them had easily scaled it, achieving a miracle that nobody had managed until now. On the other side, Xueqi did not remain idle. After killing Noya, Xueqi's level instantly rose by 1, pushing him to level 33 and allowing him to recover significantly. Immediately after, Xueqi sent a few slashes at the Grey Barrier. Blade Liberation was still in effect, so it was the best chance for him to shatter the barrier around the gate. Previously, before Xueqi had used any of his berserk skills, the Grey Barrier barely defended against Xueqi's attacks. Now, however, it had only taken a few swings to shatter the Grey Barrier. Like a balloon being poked with a needle, the barrier released a pop as it shattered completely. Xueqi then jumped up and retrieved the black slate tablet from the stone gate. I finally got it. Xueqi grinned at the chapter of darkness that was shrouded in a faint layer of demonic aura. Chapter of Darkness, dark gold rank item. The Chapter of Darkness brims with soul energy. You may pass it to a shelter's caretaker to enhance the shelter's power and activate a portion of the Chapter of Darkness's ability. Xueqi then stored the Chapter of Darkness away with satisfaction. Now that he had obtained the Chapter of Darkness, his task here was finally complete. What's left for him now was to collect the loot from Great Lord Noya. The moment Xueqi arrived before Noya's body, Blade Liberation's effect ended. Suddenly, his whole body lost strength, and his feet caught air. His attributes sharply reduced by 80% as well. At this moment, he was not even as powerful as an ordinary player. The after-effects of using twofold Berserk sure is severe. Even my mental power has nearly depleted. Xueqi suddenly felt a powerful migraine assaulting his head, and all he wanted was to lie down and sleep. If not for the Great Lord's enticing loot, he would have logged out to rest that instant. Noya was as tall as a 3-story building. Despite Xueqi having activated Divine Providence before killing the gargoyle, a jackpot had not occurred. Loot had not covered the ground around Noya's body at all. On the contrary, Xueqi only saw 6 items beside Noya's body. Are the monsters in the dark den also stingy? Xueqi frowned. If he had killed a great lord outside the dark den, the monster would have dropped a minimum of 10 items. Although Xueqi had not hoped that divine providence would grant him a jackpot from a great lord, was there a need to be this shabby? After all the trouble he went through, he had only obtained 6 items. Xueqi then picked up one item after another. With each subsequent item Xueqi picked up, his heart grew increasingly colder. He had only managed to encounter such a heaven-sent opportunity after much difficulty, yet in the end, this was all he got in return. Out of the 3 items he had already picked up, all 3 were pieces of level 40 dark gold equipment. None of these pieces were even set equipment, not to mention weapons. When Xueqi collected the 5th item, however, he was suddenly dumbfounded. Teleportation Magic Array Design. When Xueqi saw this item, he began to have visions of mountains of gold. Players residing in the Dark Den might be unfamiliar with teleportation arrays as their only form of travel was by foot, but to players outside the Dark Den, they were quite familiar with the concept. After all, when players outside the Dark Den travel to faraway maps to grind monsters, they normally use teleportation arrays to save on travel time. However, teleportation arrays could not teleport a player to every corner of God's domain, as a majority of the locations in God's domain did not possess a teleportation array. For such locations, players could only teleport to the nearest map and run the rest of the way. Even then, they would still have to waste a large amount of time. Meanwhile, the teleportation magic array design could easily solve this problem. As long as one paid a certain price and constructed a teleportation magic array at a grinding spot, players could easily teleport to that location. Of course, unlike the teleportation arrays one would normally find in the teleportation halls, which allowed teleportation between various large cities, the teleportation arrays one could construct with this forging design were the simplest version, a one-to-one teleportation array. These teleportation arrays only allowed teleportation between 2 locations. Even so, it was something many guilds dreamed of obtaining. Only, teleportation magic array designs were not that easily obtainable. Normally, great lords or above dropped them. Moreover, their drop rate was horrifically low. There was no guarantee one would obtain a design even after killing 100 great lords. On the market, a single teleportation magic array design was worth more than 10 epic items. Its value was only less than fragmented legendary items. However, nobody would be so foolish as to sell the teleportation magic array designs they obtained. For such a strategic level item, not a single player would willingly trade it even if they were offered 20 or 30 epic items. Depending on the level of an epic item, there would come a time when it would lose its value. However, teleportation magic array designs would never have such a problem. In the past, even after God's domain had been in operation for over a decade, these forging designs were still incomparably valuable. These were better at maintaining their value than any other item in the game. Chapter 588. System Upgrade. My efforts weren't in vain. Xueqi sighed as he stored the teleportation magic array design. This single forging design made all of his efforts worth it. His trip to the Dark Den had not been wasted at all. While a piece of epic equipment might improve the combat power of a single player, a single teleportation magic array design could improve a guild as a whole. As players reached higher levels, the maps they would journey to would be much farther away from cities. Currently, players visiting leveling maps around level 30 could still reduce their travel time significantly by utilizing the teleportation arrays in cities. However, maps after level 35 practically had no available arrays. Players were required to run across at least one entire map to get to their desired destinations. Even if players did not rest and did not encounter any monsters on their journey, with players' current levels, they would require at least 3 hours to cross a map. Moreover, the higher level the map was, the larger it would be, which would result in longer travel times. Hence, after players reached level 35, it was very normal to return to cities only once every 2 or 3 days. They would return only after they had exhausted their consumable items or when their equipment was in dire need of repair. With a teleportation array, Zero Wings members could return to the city or go out to the fields anytime they wished, saving plenty of time. They also wouldn't need to stay on guard throughout the night. They could easily return to the guild residence. With this, Zero Wings members could grind more efficiently, widening the gap between them and other guilds. Xueqi picked up the last item that Noya had dropped. The last item was a dark gold whistle decorated with many complex runes carved into its metal. A mount. Xueqi was shocked once more when he saw this whistle. Mounts were one of the means of transport in God's domain. After all, God's domain was massive. Not only was it laborious to travel from place to place constantly, but it would also take a huge toll on a player's body. This was where mounts came into play. Xueqi was no stranger to mounts. In the past, as the guild leader of a second-rate guild, he had plenty of mounts to choose from. However, the mount he just obtained was different from those in the past. This was a dark gold mount. In God's domain, like equipment, mounts were categorized into different ranks. There were common, bronze, mysterious iron, secret silver, fine gold, dark gold, epic, and even legendary rank. Mounts of different quality possessed varying abilities. Common mounts could only be used for transportation, and they provided an additional movement speed bonus of 100%. In other words, a journey that one would normally take 2 hours to complete would only take an hour, saving players plenty of time. As long as players reached a certain level, they could go to cities and purchase the most common mounts. Bronze mounts were slightly rarer, and not only could they be used as a means of transport, but they also possessed some offensive capabilities. They provided an additional movement speed bonus of 120%. Bronze mounts could not be purchased in cities and were only available through some high-level rare quests, large-scale team dungeons, or when a player's reputation with certain powers reached a specific level. It was extremely difficult for ordinary players to obtain bronze mounts. As for mysterious iron mounts, other than having significant improvements to their offensive capabilities, they could also carry items for players, having the same capacity as a player's mobile bag. The mounts also increased a player's movement speed by 150%. Such mounts could only be obtained through super rare quests or large-scale team dungeons with a low drop rate. Secret silver mounts were extremely rare. Not only did they possess strong offensive capabilities, but they also possessed some special skills that could be used to assist players. They could also carry more items than mysterious iron mounts, and the movement speed bonus they provided was 180%. They were even rarer than multiple pieces of dark gold equipment. Fine gold mounts were as rare as a phoenix feather. Not even the guild leader of a large guild would have won. A fine gold mount's strength was the equivalent of a special elites of the same level, and it provided 220% movement speed bonus. A fine gold mount was no less rare than 2 or 3 epic items. Dark gold mounts were even more impressive. The mount itself was already the equivalent of a chieftain of the same level. In addition, it also had special skills that made it even stronger than an ordinary chieftain. As for the movement speed bonus, a dark gold mount provided 280%. In the past, the best mount Xueqi had obtained was fine gold rank. He never expected that he would actually obtain a dark gold mount from killing a single great lord. His luck was inconceivable. Even grand lords have an extremely low chance of dropping dark gold mounts. The drop rate from great lords should be practically zero. This could be a system reward item for killing this great lord gatekeeper. Xueqi rejoiced as he examined the dark gold whistle in his hand. In God's domain, players could purchase mounts in cities once they reached level 40. Xueqi had originally planned to complete some rare quests to obtain a mysterious iron mount once he reached level 40. However, that was no longer necessary. With a dark gold mount, he could move even faster than when he activated Wind Rider. Moreover, Wind Rider had a limited duration, whereas a dark gold mount had no such limitation. In addition, a dark gold mount possessed significant combat power and special skills. Overall, while out in the fields, a dark gold mount was far more useful than an epic item. Unfortunately, it will still be some time before I reach level 40. When Xueqi thought about how powerful a dark gold mount was, he looked forward to the day he could equip this mount of his. Mounts in God's domain were not static. They could become stronger if nurtured properly. In the beginning, bronze and mysterious iron mounts only possessed combat power equivalent to that of a common monster of the same level. However, through careful nurturing, it was not impossible to raise their combat power to the standard of an elite or special elite. Naturally, dark gold mounts had far greater potential. From the moment they were born, they were already as strong as a chieftain of the same level. After nurturing, they could easily become lords or even high lords. In the past, Xueqi had seen many wealthy players and upper echelons of first-rate guilds parade their lord-rank mounts on the streets, attracting shock and awe of many players. Compared to luxury cars in the real world, these mounts were several times more impressive. Lord-ranked monsters were bosses in 20-man team dungeons. If one could ride such a monster, one could just imagine what kind of deterrent it would be. If Xueqi could nurture his dark gold mount to become a High Lord quickly, it would significantly improve his combat power. Just as Xueqi stored away the dark gold whistle and was about to turn around and leave, the sound of a system notification suddenly rang out by his ear. System announcement. God's domain will be undergoing a system upgrade. The system upgrade will require 10 real-time hours. All players must log out of the game within 10 minutes. Why has the third evolution started so soon? Xueqi was momentarily speechless. Shouldn't it initiate only after players have conquered the first 100-man team dungeon? Did a team already manage to raid one? In the past, God's Domain's third evolution was one that affected the game the most. There were two reasons why Xueqi had not hurried to raid a 100-man team dungeon all this time. Firstly, he still lacked sufficient strength. Secondly, the impact of the third evolution was simply too massive. It was still not something that he could take advantage of at the moment. That's not right. It still shouldn't be possible for anyone to raid a 100-man team dungeon yet. The precondition for doing so is to have all players reach level 30, attain their Tier 1 classes, and achieve peak combat power of a Tier 1 class. However, even with these conditions fulfilled, the success rate of clearing a 100-man team dungeon is no more than 20%. At the very least, a team needed to be fully geared with the set equipment from the 50-man team dungeons to have even a 30% to 40% success rate. Xueqi shook his head, immediately denying this possibility. Currently, all of the various large guilds were still trying to conquer 50-man team dungeons. How could they possibly have raided a 100-man team dungeon successfully? Xueqi had to admit that the system evolution this time would greatly impact his plans. Chapter 589. Era of God's Domain. I wonder how melancholic has been. Hopefully, she has collected a sufficient stock of mana crystals, Xueqi muttered somewhat regrettably as he rubbed his forehead. While the third evolution of the main god system meant that the world of God's domain was going to become even more fleshed out and realistic, it also indicated the opening of a new door. This third evolution would send God's domain to a whole new peak. Not only would demand of mana crystals suddenly rise, but the real world would also undergo some changes. Initially, Xueqi had not expected this change for at least another dozen days or so. The largest impact would be the focus shifting from an era of physical fitness to an era of God's domain. After the second evolution, everyone had a vague method of testing a player's skills through their skill completion rates. Players who could achieve a skill completion rate of 69% or below were basic players, whereas those above 70% were considered experts. As to what standard of an expert, nobody could accurately tell. However, after the third evolution of God's domain, this indicator would become very clear. After the third evolution of God's domain, the importance of skill completion rate would grow, especially in battles between players. Meanwhile, the style of combat available would also become more varied. There would be field battles, survival battles, and more. Those who pursued excitement and limits would not miss this opportunity, and these future battles would allow everyone to witness a realistic world that was completely different from the one everyone was familiar with. These battles were far more exciting than the actual fighting competitions in the real world. They were just like the real survival battle that caused a sensation to sweep across the world dozens of years ago. In order to satisfy some of the world's top figures, some of the major powers in the real world had secretly procured death row inmates, having them engage in battle in specified locations. The winner of such battles would not only obtain their freedom, but they would also receive a large sum of credits. In the end, this situation had resulted in many major powers nurturing their own experts in secret and forcing them into such survival battles. Despite major governments banning these battles on the surface, many were still conducted secretly throughout the world. Meanwhile, after God's domain underwent its third evolution and activated similar competitive battles, the game had immediately attracted a large number of players. In addition, due to God's domain's combat system reaching the peak of perfection, the game had managed to replace many of the popular fighting competitions in the real world. After all, not only were fights in God's domain without danger, but the fighters in these competitions could also improve their strength through these battles. In addition, many of those who were disabled in the real world could obtain a complete body in God's domain. Whether they were blind, deaf, or missing limbs, As long as one did not suffer from any brain damage or mental disabilities, they could enjoy life as experts in God's domain. Due to these changes, the entire world entered the era of God's domain. As for how one could become an expert, the main God system had provided a concrete answer: skill completion rate. How could one go about increasing their skill completion rates? If one relied solely on hard work and constant training, they would not experience any significant improvements. The simplest method of increasing one's skill completion rate was to improve their control over their own body. Take a person's physical strength for example. In a test, an ordinary person might land a 50 kilograms hit on the first punch and 70 kilograms on the second punch. This was a very wide margin. Meanwhile, this margin would only grow wider in a fight against another person. However, if a person underwent training and often participated in matches against other people, the fluctuations in their strength would become practically negligible and stable. With a stable output of physical strength, one's body would not break form due to using too much or too little, thereby reducing the chances of creating weak points for one's opponent to exploit. Many experts were even capable of achieving a level of control with which they could exert as much strength and accuracy as they wanted. For example, if they wanted to send out a punch with 90 kilograms of force, they could do so. One could say that their physical control had already reached perfection. The usage of skills in God's domain had a very high requirement of the body's movements. Hence, such training was a must. As a result, many people began to study martial arts, learning how to control their bodies more efficiently. Due to this, places such as training centers and dojos became instantly popular again after the third evolution of God's domain in the past. Originally, Xueqi had intended to optimize his training grounds further and secretly nurture plenty of God's domain experts. However, now that the third evolution of God's domain was being initiated, the other guilds and powers would definitely notice of the changes and immediately shift the core of their development towards martial arts dojos and training centers. Although these first-rate guilds and major powers had access to fully equipped training facilities of their own, these machines were all suited for daily exercises and maintaining physical fitness. The various powers had not particularly focused on training their members in martial arts. If they shifted their focus now, due to the inherent advantages these major powers possessed, one could just imagine how quickly they could nurture experts. Luckily, I secured the Big Dipper Training Center, obtaining a suitable training ground. I need Big Dipper to order some more of the latest equipment, Xueqi muttered silently. Following which, Xueqi searched for a safe location and prepared to log out of the game. At this moment, the players of District 1 hurriedly ran over to him. "Expert, please wait," Blue Frost hurriedly said as he dashed up to Xueqi. Xueqi glanced at Blue Frost and the others. This group had helped him significantly, forcing Noya to use Split and creating a golden opportunity for him to kill the Great Lord. Otherwise, he would have only been able to steal the Chapter of Darkness and would not have obtained a teleportation magic array, design and a dark gold mount. "Do you need something?" Xueqi asked calmly. "Brother Expert, please don't misunderstand. I am Blue Frost, the leader of District 1's first party. I have come here to congratulate you on your victory. Just now, I personally witnessed the moment you killed the Great Lord by yourself. You have truly earned my admiration," Blue Frost hurriedly explained, afraid that Xueqi would misunderstand his intentions. In truth, he, too, knew that abruptly showing himself could cause a misunderstanding. However, if Xueqi logged off, he would most likely lose the opportunity to befriend Xueqi in the future. "You're called Blue Frost?" Xueqi could not help but ask curiously as he looked at the elementalist before him. Blue Frost. Xueqi had heard this name in the past. To be precise, Xueqi had heard plenty about this person before. In the past, Fantasy Extinguisher had a powerful general named Blue Frost. Back then, Blue Frost was a well-known Tier 5 Grand Wizard, and his strength was not one bit inferior to Fantasy Extinguisher himself. Particularly, Blue Frost had learned plenty of Tier 4 curses and large-scale destruction spells. He was the nightmare for many guilds. However, the current Blue Frost was somewhat different from the one Xueqi had encountered in the past. The Blue Frost he encountered back then always wore a cold expression as if he donned a mask constantly that hid his true self. On the other hand, the Blue Frost before him looked to be a bright and cheery person. His current personality was completely different from before. "Yes, I am indeed Blue Frost. Has Brother Expert heard my name before? I'm really honored." Seeing that Feng seemed to have heard about him before, Blue Frost felt hope. May I know how I should address Brother Expert? Although their team had long since discovered Feng's name through identification skills, as a form of courtesy, it was proper to ask. Yifeng. Feng replied straightforwardly. The fact that I was able to kill the Great Lord Noya is largely due to Brother Blue Frost's team forcing Noya to use Split. Otherwise, if Noya had not weakened itself by cancelling the skill, I would have had no chance of defeating it. No. It is because Brother Yifeng is awesome. If not for Brother Yifeng, our entire team would have been wiped out. If you don't mind, why don't we go get a drink? My treat. Our District 100 berry wine is unmatched. Feng involuntarily swallowed a mouthful of saliva when he heard Blue Frost mention the 100 berry wine. This beverage was one of God's Domain's extremely famous wines. However, it was rare, and its source was unknown to everyone but its supplier. Even Feng had only tasted the wine twice in the past. He never expected that the 100 berry wine actually came from the Dark Denvert. Chapter 590. Improvement of Control. Feng promptly accepted Blue Frost's warm invitation. However, as the system was going to update soon, they could only reconvene after the upgrade completed. Feng and Blue Frost then added each other as friends. That way, they could contact each other at any time so long as both parties were online. Inside the Dark Den, players could still communicate with other players. However, it was limited to players who also resided in the Dark Den. Communication with players outside of this area was still unavailable. After logging off, Feng did not remain idle. He called Liang Jing over and had her purchase the latest training equipment available. Nowadays, with the current technology, some of the latest training facilities could even speed up the improvement of one's physical control. Only, these machines were useless to people who only sought to improve their strength and fitness. Moreover, they were extremely expensive. Each unit cost millions of credits. Hence, the various training centers had not bothered to buy them. Even martial arts dojos would only use some of the older models. Currently, the various powers that had invested in God's domain had not taken note of this. If Feng did not purchase these facilities now, it would not be as easy to do so in the future. It was the same case with the virtual gaming cabins. Master Feng, the volume you wish to purchase is simply too large. The funds required to do so exceed your allocated budget. I will have to report this to the board of directors and ask them to approve your request. Liang Jing contained her shock when she heard that Feng wanted to buy over a dozen of the latest training machines. These training machines were meant to correct the way a person used and exerted their power with the help of AI. They also had various other functions available. Meanwhile, each unit cost 2 million credits. They were extremely expensive, and practically nobody would willingly buy them. Yet, Feng actually wanted her to purchase over a dozen units. This was simply a huge waste of money. There is no need to report to the board of directors. I'm buying these machines with my own money. You just need to find a fair seller and negotiate a price for me, Feng laughed. When Liang Jing heard that Feng intended to buy so many training machines with his own funds, her little mouth involuntarily parted as she became dazed for quite some time. She knew Feng's background. He was only a student who was about to graduate from university, and he was definitely not some young master from a wealthy family. If not for his identity as a martial arts master and his limitless potential, he would not have his current position. Hence, now that Feng had suddenly revealed several tens of millions of credits in order to purchase training machines, how could she not be shocked? All right, stop daydreaming. This matter needs to be completed immediately. You only need to focus on negotiating a price for me. If the price is low, I want to buy a few more units, Feng instructed. Hearing Feng saying so, Liang Jing was thoroughly stunned. She could not figure out just where Feng had managed to obtain so much money. She even started to wonder if Feng's identity and information were fake. He was actually treating a 2 million credit machine as some sort of cabbage that one could easily buy from the market. However, as Feng was spending his own money, Liang Jing could carry out his orders. She then left the training room and began to see to the necessary arrangements. Naturally, Feng recognized Liang Jing's shock. However, he would not explain his actions. These training machines might seem expensive right now, but once the various powers shifted their attention to a player's physical control, it would be impossible to purchase these top-of-the-line training machines. In the past, if the major powers wanted to nurture experts, these training machines were a must-haves. Although these machines were not as effective as the tutelage of a martial arts master, the latter could not possibly spend their every waking moment guiding others. With these training machines, players could receive guidance and corrections any time. If they also factored in the tutelage of a martial arts master, they could very quickly nurture a group of experts. Hence, the training machines, which had not been particularly popular, instantly skyrocketed in price and demand. Moreover, these training machines were quite demanding of AI, resulting in a slow production speed. Only a limited number of units were produced each year. In the end, from its original price of 2 million, the price of each unit rose to 3 or 4 million credits. Even then, it was extremely difficult to obtain one. If Xueqi did not purchase his own now, he would not have the opportunity to do so in the future. During this period, due to Phoenix Rain secretly helping him, providing various contacts to sell the candlelight trading firm's equipment to, he had earned a lot of money. Moreover, the majority of his customers purchased the equipment with credits. After all, everybody was tight on coins at the moment. Hence, Xueqi now had plenty of credits on hand. After deducting the necessary expenditures, he still had a little over 50 million credits. In the past, this would have been a massive sum of money to Xueqi. To the current Xueqi, however, this was nothing. Even Melancholic Smile was treating such a large sum as if it were nothing. After all, as the candlelight trading firm continued to develop, it would be very easy for them to earn several, or even dozens of times more. After his morning training, Xueqi went on to guide Fire Dance and the others. In reality, he was simply teaching them how to use void steps. Void steps was an advanced style of footwork in God's domain. Unlike other advanced styles, however, void steps placed a heavy burden on its user's mental power. Even in his current state, Xueqi did not dare use void steps in battle too often. On the bright side, although void steps mentally exhausted its user, this exhaustion gave one the opportunity to break past their mental limits and increase their brain's activity. This was also Xueqi's greatest discovery regarding void steps. Only, the precondition for this was to possess S-rank nutrient fluids. However, it was not easy to learn void steps. Even Xueqi had only managed to grasp the technique recently. Whether Fire Dance and the others could successfully learn the footwork would depend on their efforts and natural talent. In the past, countless people would watch videos of experts' battles to explore and learn various bodily movements, styles of footwork, and attack techniques. However, the number of people who actually achieved success from doing so was very low. As for those who managed to learn advanced techniques, they were as rare as a phoenix's feathers. Meanwhile, void steps was a special technique that combined breathing, footwork, bodily movements, and various other subtle techniques. It was more difficult than ordinary advanced techniques, so it was typical for players to struggle or fail to learn it. Through Xueqi's teachings, only Fire Dance and Violet Cloud had managed to obtain some clues. The others were still at a loss. Regarding his companion's situation, Xueqi was helpless as well. There would be no helping it if they were unable to learn void steps. Fortunately, it did not matter much if they could not learn it. Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. Also, void steps was a combination of a wide array of techniques. Even if Kola and the others failed to grasp void steps, the knowledge and experience they gained would still be very helpful when they went on to learn other techniques. Void steps was especially useful in helping a player improve on their physical control. For example, despite Fire Dance and Violet Cloud only gaining some clues to performing the advanced style of footwork, their control over their bodies had improved significantly. They were now only a thread away from reaching half a step into the refinement realm. Their skill completion rates also rose from 80% to around 83%. If they took half a step into the refinement realm, their skill completion rates would reach 85%, allowing them to display 100% of their skills' effects. With the top-tier equipment they wore, they would instantly become great experts that stood at Star Moon Kingdom's peak. As night arrived, God's domain finally finished updating. Drinking a bottle of S-rank nutrient fluid, Xueqi immediately lay within the virtual gaming cabin and began a new day in God's domain. Chapter 591. New Changes. Just after Xueqi came online, he suddenly felt his body grow heavier. It's been quite some time since I experienced the gravitational system. It really is somewhat difficult to adapt to. Xueqi stretched and absorbed the sights, sounds, and smells of his surroundings. Based on what his senses experienced, the gravity in this region should be around 1.5 times that of normal gravity. After God's domain evolved the third time, combat and environmental effects in the game had been optimized. Not only could players detect changes in temperature more acutely, but depending on the region one was in, they would also experience a gravitational shift. This change would easily throw players off balance, particularly in battle. This gravitational shift would significantly impact a player's display of their combat power. A weapon that initially weighed 5 kilograms might become lighter or heavier depending on the area's gravity. It would cause players, who had already grown accustomed to the weight of their weapons, to feel uncomfortable. This would cause deviations when these players activated their skills, resulting in significant declines in skill completion rates. Shortly after Xueqi logged into the game, the members of District 1 also began to load into the game, one after another. What's going on? Why do I suddenly feel sluggish? A shield warrior very quickly discovered that something was amiss. It's true. It feels somewhat awkward when I try to swing my greatsword. A berserker on the same team clearly felt the problem with his body as well. Although the other classes were similarly affected, the impact to their performance was not as significant as it was for the plate armor classes. The gravity must have changed. As one of the top-tier experts in District 1, Blue Frost immediately pinpointed the cause of their current predicament. Since gravity has changed, let's not move unnecessarily for now. We'll leave this place after we adapt. Everyone else on the team suddenly understood upon hearing Blue Frost's words, and they began to familiarize themselves with their new weight. Currently, it was still nighttime in the dark Denver. There were a lot of monsters hunting for food in the fields. Although Xueqi and the others had logged into the game in a safe location, a pack of level 40 elite-ranked demonic light jackals quickly discovered them. These light jackals maneuvered their way through the forest swiftly, rapidly approaching Xueqi and the District 1 team. Not good. A pack of jackals is approaching. A ranger with sharp senses shouted. Demonic light jackals were this area's tyrants. At night, these monsters usually moved in packs of 7 to 10. Moreover, a chieftain and multiple special elites usually led these packs. Facing such a group of monsters was normally extremely difficult. Even death was a possibility. Unfortunately, they were not only missing members, but the gravitational change also affected their combat power significantly. Fighting these demonic light jackals as they were would be a big problem. Prepare for battle. Blue Frost frowned. Hurriedly he said, MTs, just focus on pinning down the jackals. Don't make any rash movements. The team from District 1 had not yet fully adapted to the gravitational shift. This sudden change greatly affected the plate armor classes in particular, and it would be quite challenging for them to serve as reliable combatants. The team could only rely on the magical classes for now. Yes, sir. Under Blue Frost's command, everyone on the team fell into formation, prepared to welcome the approaching battle. Sure enough, after the team took up their positions, demonic light jackals began to emerge from the dark forest, one after another. These jackals split up into groups of 3 to 5, each group setting their eyes on a single target. Meanwhile, among these groups of demonic light jackals, there were also the larger special elite-ranked demonic claw jackals and chieftain-ranked black demonic jackals. Demonic claw jackal, demonic creature, special elite. Level 40. HP 360. 000/360. 000. Black demonic jackal, demonic creature, chieftain rank. Level 40. HP 1, 000, 000/1, 000, 000. Our luck is really bad. There are 8 demonic claw jackals and 2 black demonic jackals in this group. Evening Lotus's expression turned grim when she saw the pack of jackals. Are there 2 packs here? Normally, each pack only had 1 chieftain and 3 to 5 special elites. Now, the numbers had doubled. All elementalists, use Ice Wall. Try to split them up as much as possible and don't give them any chances to use group tactics. This was not the first time Blue Frost had fought these jackals, so he was very familiar with their attack methods. Upon receiving the command, the dozen or so elementalists in the team began chanting incantations, casting ice walls in an attempt to separate the jackals. Even if they could not separate them, they could still slow their movement speed should the jackals attempt to gang up on a player. Oh! The two black demonic jackals howled. Suddenly, the 80-plus demonic light jackals began to take action. Under the command of the black demonic jackals, the demonic light jackals split into two groups. More than 30 mounted a frontal attack, while the remaining 50-plus rounded to the side for a pincer attack. Damn! 4 of the demonic light jackals launched themselves towards one of the level 29 shield warriors simultaneously. Although he tried to defend himself with his shield, due to the change in gravity, his movements were somewhat slow. As a result, he suffered the bites of all 4 jackals, instantly losing more than half of his HP. The other melee players faced similar situations. Only the magical classes standing in the center of the team had an easier time. What's up with these jackals? Are they actually players in disguise? After fighting for some time, everyone quickly discovered that something was off. The demonic light jackals had actually torn a small hole in their formation, and the moment they did, the demonic claw jackals and black demonic jackals charged through that hole, dashing towards the team's healers. Using Fierce Gale, one of the black demonic jackals instantly arrived before a Tier 1 oracle. Before this oracle could use Mantra Resist, the chieftain's attack sent him flying, his body transforming into particles of light. Something's wrong. These monsters have become smarter. Melees, hold them off as much as possible. We're retreating immediately. Blue Frost's complexion paled. Even a fool could tell that these monsters had changed. In the past, while players had pinned them down, these jackals had not bothered the healers in the rear line at all. Now the chieftain and special elite ranked jackals sent their underlings to keep the MTs busy, whereas they set their sights on the team's healers. To player teams, this sudden transformation was fatal. At this moment, one demonic light jackal had managed to locate a gap and pounced on Xueqi. Demonic light jackal, demonic creature, elite rank. Level 40. HP 140, 000/140, 000. Just as this elite jackal's glistening claws were about to sink into Xueqi's back, he suddenly took half a step to his left and tilted his body. As the jackal's claws glided past Xueqi, the elite monster exposed its body. The demonic light jackal was as tall as a player, and pitch-black fur covered its entire body. There was also a horn on top of its head. Even if a player wore a mysterious iron breastplate, this horn could still easily penetrate the armor, breaking through the player's defense. These jackals were natural-born killers of the night. Xueqi then unsheathed the abyssal blade, sending a Tier 1 chop at the jackal before him. 3 silver moons bloomed from the demonic light jackal's body. Immediately, the elite monster released an agonizing scream. Its body then slammed into a massive tree, frightening damages of -3076, -4622, and -9254 appearing above its head. System. Chop completion rate 92%, resulting in 125% of skills effect. Skill proficiency +4. With just one skill, the demonic light jackal lost over 12% of its HP. Sure enough, the 1.5 times of gravity has caused my completion rate to drop significantly. Xueqi frowned, disappointed with his attack. As for the increase in these monsters' intelligence, Xueqi was not one bit surprised. As God's domain evolved, the monsters in the game would grow increasingly smarter. Currently, these jackals were only targeting the healers of a team. In the future, they would target the team's commander instead. However, Xueqi had no intention of letting these jackals flaunt their arrogance in front of him. Adjusting his footwork, he transformed into a shadow as he dashed towards a level 40 black demonic jackal. Chapter 592. Player's Advantage. Destroy the leader, and the gang will collapse. This was a law of the war. The elite-ranked demonic light jackals were like soldiers on a battlefield. The chieftain-ranked black demonic jackals directed their actions completely. Hence, as long as Xueqi could defeat the black demonic jackals quickly, this pack's fierce assault would crumble. However, taking out the enemy commander in a field battle was a most difficult task. As a chieftain-ranked monster, beyond being the strongest among this pack of jackals, the black demonic jackal's sensitivity towards danger was also the highest. While Xueqi was still some distance behind one of the two level 40 black demonic jackals, the chieftain had already noticed Xueqi's presence. Immediately, it stopped attacking the District 1 healers and turned to face Xueqi. Bearing its sharp fangs, the black demonic jackal released a low growl, seemingly issuing a command. After this black demonic jackal's growl, two of the nearby special elite-ranked demonic claw jackals moved to stand before the chieftain. The two jackals then pounced on Xueqi, brandishing their claws at the swordsman. The players a short distance away were stupefied when they witnessed the attack. In the past, these jackals had been bloodthirsty and reckless monsters. Back then, the chieftain-ranked black demonic jackal would usually be the first to dive into battle, tearing its enemies apart. Yet, now, it called upon its underlings to serve as its guards while the chieftain itself continued massacring their team's healers. Even an elite party of the same level would struggle against two demonic claw jackals with 360,000 HP. Not to mention current players that were of much lower level than these jackals. Players could only rely on equipment with the ignore level attribute to have a fighting chance. Brother Yifeng, let me help you. Noticing the importance of killing the black demonic jackals as well, Blue Frost led two parties over to assist Xueqi. No. You guys handle these two special elites. I'll deal with the two black demonic jackals, Xueqi immediately countered. Under normal circumstances, with the strength of the District 1 members, a single party would be more than enough to deal with one black demonic jackal. However, due to the gravitational shift affecting their combat power, they would most likely require a very long time to defeat just one black demonic jackal. Hence, it would be far more efficient for these parties to deal with the demonic claw jackals first. But there are two black demonic jackals, Blue Frost said, slightly worried. However, when he recalled how Xueqi had defeated a great lord by himself, even if the gravitational shift affected the Maverick's combat power, he should have no problem pinning down two black demonic jackals. Immediately, Blue Frost said gratefully, I'll have to trouble Brother Yifeng then. Blue Frost then led his two parties to deal with the two demonic claw jackals. Using the footwork for void steps, Xueqi instantly disappeared. Even the special elite ranked jackals lost sight of him, surprise coloring their expressions as they searched for the swordsman. However, no matter how hard they tried, they simply could not discover any trace of Xueqi. What kind of skill is this? Don't tell me the swordsman class can actually turn invisible? The female cleric, Evening Lotus, stated in surprise. No, that's not a skill. Invisibility skills have a slight activation delay. Even an assassin's vanish skill is no exception to this rule. He must have used some sort of technique. Blue Frost was very knowledgeable, so he quickly realized that void steps was not a skill available in the game, but a technique. However, this technique is truly amazing. The Mavericks I've seen before have only wielded techniques that increased their attack or dodging speeds. This is the first time I have seen a technique that allows its user to vanish from everyone's sight. Both shock and admiration filled Blue Frost when he saw Xueqi's void steps. Such a technique was practically a life-saving skill. Whether the technique was used to escape or assassinate, it could yield miraculous effects. With such strength and techniques, he is definitely not someone we should provoke or make an enemy of. At this moment, Blue Frost rejoiced over the fact that he had befriended Xueqi and had not become enemies with him. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shortly after Xueqi disappeared, the nearby black demonic jackal howled painfully. Oh! The black demonic jackal called out for the other black demonic jackal to help as it glowered at Xueqi, who had suddenly appeared beside it. At this moment, there was also a hint of fear within its eyes. Xueqi had suddenly appeared by its side, his sword easily cutting through its iron-like skin, leaving behind a very long gash. The wound still bled. Although its defense is not as high as the dark magic serpent, its reaction speed is truly frightening. It actually managed to react the instant I stopped using void steps. Xueqi was quite surprised as he observed the black demonic jackal's wound. Although there was a wide slice across the chieftain's body, the wound was not particularly deep. It would not affect the monster's mobility. After the third evolution of God's domain, not only had the gravitational system appear, but the monster combat system had also changed, making battles against monsters even more realistic. This also created a new weakness. In the past, Monsters would only lose some HP after being wounded. Even when their vital points had been struck, the attack would only deal a little more damage than usual. Their movements had not been affected whatsoever. However, after the third system upgrade, monsters' injuries would affect their movements and attacks. Naturally, the same held true for players. However, unlike monsters, players had healers to help them recover from these injuries quickly, maintaining full HP. This was a huge advantage. When the two black demonic jackals grouped up, rather than pouncing on their enemy, they circled Xueqi, looking for his weak point to land a fatal hit. Even an MT of the same level would die instantly under the combination of a level 40 chieftain's attack power and a super high damage skill. Not to mention Xueqi, who is only level 33 right now. The black demonic jackals were precisely chieftains with such skills. Unlike the dark magic serpent, which utilized its vicious venom skill to exhaust its enemies to death, the black demonic jackals used the horn on their heads to tear apart all enemies before them. The horn attack of a chieftain-ranked monster would even pierce secret silver equipment. At this moment, the players of District 1 focused all of their attention on Xueqi and the two black demonic jackals' every action. This battle would determine the life and death of either side. Ayo! Following the howl, the two black demonic jackals launched their attacks simultaneously. A large amount of wind mana also began to gather around their pitch-black horns. Immediately, the two chieftains transformed into miniature tornadoes as they flew towards Xueqi. Crap! Dodge it quickly! Blue Frost shouted anxiously. These miniature tornadoes were no trivial matter. If they struck a player, there was zero chance of survival. However, Xueqi did not bother to dodge the oncoming attacks. His lips curling up slightly, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power. After logging out of the game for 10 hours, not only had his weakened debuff worn off, but the cooldown for all his skills had also completed. Otherwise, he would have had to activate space movement in order to dodge the attacks. After activating Heavenly Dragon's power, Xueqi's strength doubled. He then met the black demonic jackal's attacks with a Thunderflame explosion. System: Thunderflame explosion completion rate 91%, resulting in 120% of skill's effect. Skill proficiency +4. Although his completion rate was significantly lower than before, 120% of the skill's effect was still impressive. The Tier 1 Thunderflame explosion's effective range of 10 yards immediately increased to 12 yards. When lightning and fire made contact with the two black demonic jackals, the two chieftains' movement speed immediately and sharply dropped, becoming only 1/7 of their initial attribute. As a result, Xueqi easily dodged the two oncoming miniature tornadoes. With a speed reduction of nearly 8 seconds, the two chieftain-ranked jackals could only receive a one-sided beating from Xueqi. During these 8 seconds, each black demonic jackal lost roughly 10% of their HP. Just as the movement speed reduction debuff was about to wear out, Xueqi swung the Abyssal blade and summoned his doppelganger. The doppelganger then followed up with its own Thunderflame explosion, instantly devouring over 10,000 HP from both chieftains and reducing their movement speeds once more. With the doppelganger assisting him with dealing damage, Xueqi's total damage output nearly doubled. Xueqi and his doppelganger then each fought one black demonic chieftain, significantly reducing the difficulty of the fight. Thundering Flash, Earth Splitter, Skywheel Sword, Firestorm, Flame Burst. When Xueqi activated Flame Burst, every one of his attacks dealt over -20,000 damage. His doppelganger also dealt over -10,000 damage with its attacks. In addition to the frequent critical hits, the two managed to destroy close to half the HP of one black demonic jackal. In less than 20 seconds, one of the chieftains fell. The remaining black demonic jackal was also heavily injured, covered in such severe wounds that one could easily see bone. As a result, the chieftain's mobility was incredibly limited. Even without the doppelganger's assistance, with Heavenly Dragon's power's duration of 2 minutes, Xueqi finished off the last black demonic jackal very easily. This burst power is invincible. Evening Lotus's jaw dropped when she saw the two dead black demonic jackals. She was so shocked that she had even momentarily forgotten to heal her team's MTs. Although everyone had witnessed Xueqi defeat a great lord, watching two chieftains die in such a short time and at such a close distance still astounded them. They were still not used to Xueqi's terrifying damage. Chapter 593. Promising Newcomer. When the two chieftain-ranked black demonic jackals died, the entire pack suddenly fell into chaos, their attacks becoming monotonous. Moreover, after such a long battle, every jackal had received some form of injury. Those that were heavily injured had even lost a detrimental amount of mobility. In contrast, although Blue Frost's team had lost over a dozen players in this fight, as their team had healers to keep them alive, the survivors were all in perfect condition. Their combat power had not been affected at all. On the contrary, after fighting for a time, they had begun to adapt to the new gravity. Suddenly, the tides changed. Blue Frost's team immediately gained the advantage as they began killing off the elite and special elite jackals. As expected of a team from District 1, their members' capabilities are impressive. They can deal with these jackals so quickly. After Xueqi picked up the loot that the two black demonic jackals had dropped, he had not bothered to help Blue Frost and the others. He simply glanced at their intense battle. Currently, the melee players of the team had begun striking at the jackal's limbs, particularly the monster's powerful hind legs. That way, they could greatly hamper the monster's mobility, making the battle far easier. At this point, the outcome of the battle was already clear. Xueqi began to arrange the drops he obtained from the two chieftains. He was already level 33. Despite having killed two level 40 chieftains, his experience bar had not increased by much. Meanwhile, after using Divine Providence, his harvest from the two black demonic jackals was very bountiful. The two chieftains had dropped a total of 6 soul crystals. Unfortunately, the other items were not worth mentioning. The rest was just a bunch of level 40 mysterious iron equipment and materials. With 6 soul crystals, I should be able to trade them for a tier 1 taboo skill. Xueqi smiled with satisfaction. It was not easy for players outside of the Dark Den to obtain tier 1 taboo skills. If he could have every Zero Wing Corps member learn a tier 1 taboo skill, they would have no problems with conquering a 50-man large-scale team dungeon. Against a level 28 Great Lord ranked boss, even if they could not kill it with one series of attacks, they could severely injure it. At that time, the team only needed to expend a little more effort to defeat the boss. After the battle ended, Blue Frost immediately walked up to Xueqi, gratefully saying, "Brother Yifeng, I really have to thank you for your help. If not for you, this might have been our team's grave today. If you need help with anything in the future, just tell me. Can you help me trade for some tier 1 taboo skills?" Xueqi had long since considered this request. Although Discipline Paradise was the leader of District 5's third party, he could only get his hands on a limited number of tier 1 taboo skills. On the other hand, as the leader of District 1's first party, Blue Frost definitely had access to plenty of taboo skills. It would be much easier for Xueqi to trade with Blue Frost. "You want to obtain a taboo skill?" Blue Frost could not help his surprise. With Xueqi's abilities, he should have long since obtained a tier 1 taboo skill for himself. However, although Blue Frost was curious, it would not be proper to ask about it. Immediately he nodded, saying, "That is a simple request. No need to trade. If Brother Yifeng wants a tier 1 taboo skill, I can just give you one." "I don't want just one taboo skill." Xueqi shook his head. "I wonder if Brother Frost can obtain 20 tier 1 taboo skills for me." 20? Initially, Blue Frost intended to agree with Xueqi immediately. However, upon hearing that Xueqi required 20, he was shocked. Laughing bitterly he said, "Brother Yifeng, as a maverick, you might not know this, but each tier 1 taboo skill requires about 5 soul crystals worth of contribution shares in trade. Even the first party of a shelter needs 4 soul crystals to trade for one. If they are for someone else, each skill book will cost an additional soul crystal. Moreover, I can only trade for 3 taboo skills per day. If it were in the past, I might have barely been able to trade for 20 taboo skills. However, after I purchased the demon suppressing barrier, the maximum number of taboo skills I can gain right now is 10. If Brother Yifeng wants them, I won't try to profit off you. 10 taboo skills for 50 soul crystals." 10. Xueqi was surprised. He had simply mentioned 20 to discover Blue Frost's bottom line. He had not expected that Blue Frost could purchase as many as 10 tier 1 taboo skills. Sure enough, the title of District 1's first party was well deserved. "So be it. I want all of them. May I know when Brother Frost can obtain all 10? Xueqi did not particularly mind the issue of the soul crystals. He just needed to kill some level 40 chieftains to increase his stock. I can have them ready in a day. Blue Frost was shocked to hear Xueqi's decisive agreement. Even their first party required a long time to obtain one soul crystal. Currently, their party only had about a dozen or so in their warehouse. After including the contribution shares they had stocked up, Blue Frost still needed to borrow many soul crystals from other parties. Yet, a maverick like Xueqi could spend 50 soul crystals so casually. Following which, Xueqi followed Blue Frost to District 1. On the way back, the group had been ambushed by chieftain-ranked monsters many times. As a result, Xueqi had gained another 9 soul crystals by the time they reached District 1's shelter. The shelter Blue Frost and the others resided in occupied the heart of a high-level area. The monsters surrounding the shelter were all level 35 and above. That was 5 levels higher than the monsters surrounding District 5. Currently, the monster assault on District 1 had ended. Corpses of level 35 monsters littered the surrounding area outside of the shelter's walls. There were over 10,000 dead monsters outside of the shelter. Among them, there was no lack of elite, and even chieftain-ranked monsters. One could just imagine how intense the battle must have been. Moreover, even after God's domain had undergone its 3rd evolution, District 1 still managed to defend its shelter successfully. It went to show how strong a foundation the players of District 1 possessed. The moment Blue Frost and his team entered the shelter, the players inside immediately sent them reverent gazes. Many female players even shrieked when Blue Frost's glance swept over them. In District 1, Blue Frost was practically a celebrity. He attracted attention wherever he went, and almost everyone in the shelter knew of him. "Leader, you've returned. Did you finish off the Great Lord Noya?" A skinny and youthful level 29 berserker asked excitedly as he ran up to Blue Frost. When Xueqi saw the skinny berserker, he involuntarily stiffened. He recognized this berserker. The youth's name was Wind Chaser. He was also one of the most powerful experts who had worked under Fantasy Extinguisher in the past. Back then, he had successfully learned a Tier 5 taboo skill, and his strength was only inferior to those Tier 6 God-ranked players. Great Lords and High Lords are monsters on entirely different levels. It was useless, even with the demon-suppressing barrier, Blue Frost said, shaking his head. He could not help his fear as he remembered how powerful Noya had been. Fortunately, we had Brother Yifeng's help. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have returned with our lives. When Wind Chaser heard Blue Frost mention Xueqi, the berserker shifted his gaze toward Xueqi, his eyes containing a hint of awe and fighting spirit. "Chaser, don't have any foolish ideas. Brother Yifeng is a guest that I've invited. Not to mention, in front of Brother Yifeng, those weak combat techniques of yours are not worth mentioning. If you want to fight, go look for Blue Bull." Blue Frost glared at Wind Chaser. He had personally witnessed how powerful Xueqi was. Setting aside the fact that Xueqi had defeated the Great Lord Noya by himself, just the number of chieftains Xueqi had killed on their way back had left him speechless. Wind Chaser most likely would not survive a single move against Xueqi. Meanwhile, Blue Bull, the person Blue Frost had mentioned, was none other than their District 1's #1 berserker. Blue Bull was extremely powerful, and within their first party, Blue Bull's position was only beneath his. However, as the operation against Noya had mainly relied on magical classes, and defending the shelter against the monster's assault was also very important, Blue Bull had not been selected to participate in the raid. Meanwhile, Wind Chaser often liked to test himself against Blue Bull. Although Wind Chaser lost terribly every time, the berserker never grew bored of challenging Blue Bull. After Blue Frost's reprimand, Wind Chaser was a little satisfied. However, after hearing his leader's suggestion, he immediately turned around, planning to look for Blue Bull to test his skills against him once again. At this time, however, Xueqi suddenly said, "No worries. It's good to be impulsive sometimes. As a guest of District 1, I have not prepared any gifts. I don't mind sparring with Wind Chaser to liven things up a little." Chapter 594. Powerful Secret. Hearing Xueqi accept Wind Chaser's challenge, those who knew just what kind of power Xueqi wielded were confounded. Although PvPs were frequent occurrences in shelters, These fights were usually meant to help each other improve. Take Blue Bull of First Party for example. If not for his notice of Wind Chaser's potential, he would not have bothered sparring with the youth, offering pointers of how the other berserker could improve his techniques. Not to mention, Xueqi was a maverick that had zero relations with their District 1 at all. Since brother Yifeng is willing to give Chaser a few pointers, this could not have worked out better. Blue Frost was naturally quite pleased with Xueqi's offer. He turned to his subordinate, immediately instructing, "Lotus, go to the Lion's Bar and make the arrangements, particularly for the 100-berry wine. Today, we're reserving all of it. Consider it done." Hearing Blue Frost's command, Evening Lotus turned and ran towards the Lion's Bar. However, this scene had left many of those who had come forth to greet Blue Frost speechless. Who is this Yifeng? Leader Blue Frost is actually being so generous, renting out the entire Lion's Bar. I recall that renting out the Lion's Bar costs 3 gold. You think coins alone are sufficient? You also need plenty of contribution shares to rent out the Lion's Bar. Moreover, the cost only a trivial matter compared to the 100-berry wine. Not only does each bottle cost 1 gold, but it also requires 200 contributions. I have to complete 10 contribution quests just to collect 200 contribution shares. Also, only 20 bottles of 100-berry wine are available each day. That's a total of 20 gold and 4,000 contribution shares. This is worth far more than 1 soul crystal. Everyone shifted their gaze toward Xueqi, awe and curiosity filling their hearts. The Lion's Bar was the best bar available in District 1's shelter. Even Blue Frost's first party would feel a sting from their wallets when they visited the bar, not to mention renting out the entire place and spoiling everyone with 100-berry wine. Not even the visiting first-party leaders of other shelters would warrant such a grand welcome. Following which, Blue Frost led Xueqi on a stroll towards the Lion's Bar, introducing him to District 1's situation on their way. Wind Chaser tagged along in high spirits. He really wanted to know just how powerful Xueqi was to earn such high respect from Blue Frost. Xueqi's 5 senses were far superior to ordinary players. Naturally, he could detect Wind Chaser's fiery fighting spirit. His personality is still the same as it was then, constantly challenging every powerhouse he met. It was no wonder he became someone who was only inferior to Tier 6 classes in the past. Xueqi inwardly sighed. In the past, both Blue Frost and Wind Chaser had become extremely famous experts throughout God's domain. Fantasy Shrine, Fantasy Extinguisher's first-rate guild, had only surpassed a powerful guild like Ouroboros due to these experts. In this life, however, Fantasy Extinguisher would not have the chance to receive the epic quest Darkness Descends, so it could not lead him here where he could recruit these people. Instead, that opportunity had fallen into Xueqi's hands in this life. If he could recruit Blue Frost and his team, Zero Wing would certainly grow more powerful for it. Soon, Xueqi and the others arrived before the Lion's Bar. The Lion's Bar was different than other bars in the shelter. This bar that could only be constructed once a shelter had developed up to a certain degree. The NPCs guarding the bar were extremely powerful, with the weakest at level 150, the bouncers being level 180 Tier 2 NPCs, and the proprietress was a level 200 Tier 3 NPC. These NPCs even qualified to guard a small city. Even if monsters invaded the shelter, the Lion's Bar would not fall. Aside from consuming alcohol at the Lion's Bar, players could also engage in PvP battles inside. The PvP battles here operated in a similar fashion to the battles held in the underground arenas found in the outside world in that other players were allowed to place bets on the fights. Hence, many players of District 1 frequented the Lion's Bar. At this moment, however, Blue Frost had reserved the entire establishment, so not many players occupied the 3-story tall bar right now. Upon entering the Lion's Bar, Xueqi discovered that the place resembled the Colosseum of ancient Rome. There was an arena in the establishment center. There were also spectator stands surrounding the arena that allowed players to consume alcohol while watching the matches. When Xueqi arrived before a large private room, he discovered that the room already held plenty of players. Every one of these players possessed frightening auras, and they all wore dazzling equipment. The lowest-leveled player among them was level 28, and one could easily tell that they were not ordinary players. Brother Yifeng, let me introduce you. These people are the party leaders and vice leaders of our District 1's top 10 parties. They have heard about your arrival, so they wish to make your acquaintance. Blue Frost began introducing Theses leaders, one after another. Hello, I am the party leader of second party, Best Reincarnation. Hello, Big Brother Yifeng. I am the leader of third party, Shallow Moon. These players did not even show a hint of arrogance as they introduced themselves to Xueqi. On the contrary, they treated Xueqi as if he were an old friend. In truth, even without any introduction, Xueqi already knew who they were. In the past, every one of these players had been upper managers of Fantasy Shrine. Encountering Blue Frost and Wind Chaser had already surprised Xueqi. Now, even the many upper managers of Fantasy Shrine appeared before him. Xueqi began to suspect whether or not District 1 had been Fantasy Shrine's main headquarters. After exchanging pleasantries, Xueqi finally understood why Blue Frost had invited all of these players. Unlike the other shelters, the parties of District 1 were fiercely ambitious. They did not care about holding the title of District 1 in this region. Rather, they hoped to step out of this region and become the #1 shelter in all regions. Hence, the parties in District 1 were all united, unlike the parties in other shelters, which treated each other as enemies rather than allies. It was also due to this that the shelter in District 1 had managed to construct the Lion's Bar so quickly. On the other hand, the other shelters in this region had yet to construct a single advanced establishment like the Lion's Bar. As the conversation continued, Blue Frost also revealed Xueqi's victory over the Great Lord Noya and his slaughter of the many chieftains they had encountered on their way back, shocking everyone present. The various parties present had all been helpless against Noya. Only the first party had a small chance of defeating the Great Lord. They had not expected to hear that Xueqi had actually defeated Noya by himself. Even though the Great Lord had been weakened, it was still an astonishing feat. Brother Frost, you are too insincere. You did not record a video for us to take a look. That's right. This will definitely become a legend throughout God's domain. Everyone voiced their complaints, greatly disappointed that they had not personally witnessed Xueqi's performance. At the same time, their reverence of Xueqi grew even more intense. Ha ha ha! I had been completely stupefied by Brother Yifeng's performance. By the time I thought of it, the battle was already over. Blue Frost scratched his head in embarrassment. However, you are not without a chance to watch him fight. In a moment, Brother Yifeng is going to give Chaser a few pointers, so you guys will get to see how powerful Brother Yifeng is. Leader, can I drink a bottle of the 100-berry wine before the match begins? Wind Chaser hurriedly asked Blue Frost in embarrassment. Initially, he had thought Xueqi was only an ordinary maverick. He never expected that Xueqi was actually capable of defeating a great lord by himself. Immediately, Wind Chaser had treated Xueqi as if the swordsman were the strongest expert he had ever encountered. If you were sparring against anyone else today, I wouldn't let you waste a bottle. Here, take this. Blue Frost laughed as he shook his head. He then took a cyan bottle of wind and handed it to Wind Chaser. Thank you, leader. Wind Chaser hurriedly accepted the 100-berry wind. The youthful berserker was like a hungry wolf looking at fresh meat when he saw the bottle of berry wine in his hands. With just a few gulps, he emptied the entire bottle. Wind Chaser's cheeks suddenly flushed, clearly having become drunk already. Ha ha ha! He's drunk after just one bottle. It seems that Chaser still needs training. The others could not help but laugh. Although Wind Chaser had gotten himself drunk, Xueqi could clearly tell that the feeling the berserker gave off had changed. If he had been an unsheathed blade before drinking the wine, he was now a hidden blade. The blade might seem harmless while sheathed, but once it was revealed, it would definitely take its target's life. Though everyone else had similarly detected the change in Wind Chaser, it did not surprise them whatsoever. On the contrary, they all thought it was natural. What's going on here? Xueqi could not help his surprise. Is this related to the 100-berry wine? Chapter 595. Frightening Wine. Xueqi glanced at the bottle of 100-berry wine on the table, confirming that it was identical to the one he had drunk in the past. However, when he had enjoyed the 100-berry wine, he had not experienced any particular changes to his body like Wind Chaser had. He only considered it incredibly delicious, so much so that it was hard to stop drinking. Yet, seeing Wind Chaser's sudden transformation, It was obvious that the 100-berry wine had some hidden effect. Does the 100-berry wine possess some sort of effect that I do not know of? The more Xueqi thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. Aside from satisfying thirst and hunger, some food and beverages in God's domain could increase a player's attributes or provide some other temporary benefits. Take the black steel beer for example. Players that consumed it could gain the ignore levels effect, allowing them to challenge monsters of a higher level without suffering any penalties. Although one could ignore more levels as they consumed more bottles of black steel beer, there were also side effects. One side effect was the drunken effect. With this debuff, one's vision would turn blurry, and their senses would numb, resulting in a decrease in combat power. One might even lose the ability to fight at all if they consumed too many black steel beers. Meanwhile, the 100-berry wine clearly possessed a similar effect. In the past, I only drank a cup of 100-berry wine at a time. On the other hand, Wind Chaser drank the entire bottle at once. These changes must only happen after a player drinks an entire bottle. Xueqi's interest in the 100-berry wine grew. He then jumped onto the arena. Smiling at the drunken Wind Chaser, he said, "Let's get this started." Xueqi intended to test Wind Chaser properly. The 100-berry wine's effect should not be limited to increasing a player's attributes if it was able to cause a person's aura to change to such a degree. The PvP battles held in the Lion's Bar's arena were slightly different. Most arenas would not usually limit a player's attributes. The Lion's Bar's PvP arena, on the other hand, would adjust both parties' attributes to be on equal footing. Hence, items that increased attributes were useless in this arena, making the fight a competition of techniques only. As the countdown timer above the arena began to tick down, Blue Frost and the others, who watched from the spectator stands, revealed smiles, though the intentions hidden behind each smile were different. "Brother Frost, who do you think will win?" the Oracle, Shallow Moon, asked. Smiling, she continued, "In this match, both sides possess equal attributes. However, while Big Brother Yifeng is a swordsman, Wind Chaser is a berserker. In terms of classes, berserkers possess an innate advantage over swordsmen. Moreover, Wind Chaser drank a bottle of 100-berry wine, increasing his combat power significantly. Even Big Brother Blue Bull would struggle against Wind Chaser with these conditions. Although I believe that Brother Yifeng is very strong, while both of them possess the same attributes, Wind Chaser should have a higher chance of victory, right? After all, he did drink the 100-berry wine," a Guardian Knight commented. Everyone nodded, agreeing with this Guardian Knight's estimation. Everyone present was quite familiar with Wind Chaser's techniques. Among the melee classes in the first party, other than Blue Bull, no one could defeat Wind Chaser in terms of techniques. Meanwhile, against a great lord, players relied more on attributes rather than techniques. Despite Blue Frost's mention of how mysterious and godlike Xueqi was, in their opinion, they only thought of Xueqi as just someone who was slightly stronger than Blue Bull. On the other hand, when Wind Chaser consumed a bottle of 100-berry wine, not even Blue Bull could win against the youthful berserker. Naturally, Xueqi would not fare any better. "Since none of you have a high opinion of Brother Yifeng, why don't we place a bet?" Blue Frost suggested. "This is my favorite part. What are we betting?" Best Reincarnation, the leader of second party, suddenly grew interested. "Simple. We'll bet on the outcome of the battle. The wager will be soul crystals, and I'll be the bookkeeper. If Brother Yifeng wins, the payout ratio will be 1-2, while Wind Chaser will be 1-1. You may only bet on one player." Blue Frost could tell that everyone doubted Xueqi's strength. After all, without having witnessed the battles personally, even he would find it unbelievable. Now, it just so happened he could take advantage of the situation to make a little profit, making up for the cost of the feast that he hosted. "Okay, I'll bet 2 soul crystals on Wind Chaser. That brat has improved quite a lot recently. Brother Frost, you better not regret your decision. I'll bet 1 soul crystal on Wind Chaser as well." In a short moment, the various party leaders and vice leaders had all placed bets on Wind Chaser winning this match. One could tell just how little trust everyone had in Xueqi's strength. Only the cleric, Evening Lotus, had bet on Xueqi winning. "Leader, can I use credit on this bet? I only have 2 soul crystals with me, but I wish to bet 10 crystals on Big Brother Yifeng," Evening Lotus asked as she gave Blue Frost a pitiful look. Immediately, Blue Frost rolled his eyes at his party's cleric. Resolutely he said no. If he allowed Evening Lotus to use credit, he wouldn't make any profit. As the battle in the arena began, everyone's gazes locked on Xueqi and Wind Chaser. The moment the battle began, Wind Chaser instantly used charge. Like an agile and powerful cheetah, the berserker dashed towards Xueqi. However, despite this, Xueqi did not try to evade Wind Chaser's attack, allowing the youth's charge skill to connect. Ha! He isn't using parry. When Wind Chaser was only 5 yards away from Xueqi, he noticed that Xueqi had still not moved, the swordsman seemingly having no intentions of defending against his charge. Wind Chaser then abruptly swung his greatsword. At almost the same moment as his body crashed into Xueqi's, his silver greatsword also struck Xueqi's head. Wind Chaser's actions were both simple and swift. Hua! The silver greatsword sliced through Xueqi's body and smashed into the ground, creating a long and deep crevice. An afterimage. Sensing that something was amiss, Wind Chaser used Whirlwind Slash, a skill capable of causing massive damage to enemies within a 3-yard radius. The silver greatsword was like a wooden pole in Wind Chaser's hand. With little effort, the berserker transformed into a silver tornado that engulfed everything in its wake. Boom! As Wind Chaser used Whirlwind Slash, a loud boom echoed throughout the arena, followed by a figure flying away from the berserker. Close 1. Wind Chaser could not help but sigh with relief when he saw that the figure he had sent flying was none other than Xueqi. If he had not used Whirlwind Slash at the first sign of danger, the sword in Xueqi's hand would have bitten into his body by now. Such impressive dodging speed. I couldn't even see what he did just now. The level 29 shield warrior, best reincarnation, exclaimed in shock. It is no wonder why Leader Frost praised Brother Yifeng so highly. With such an amazing dodging speed, it will be very difficult for Chaser to land a hit, though an assassin might have a chance. Everyone was similarly shocked by the skill Xueqi had displayed. Although a few among them could similarly produce an afterimage, they definitely could not achieve it as silently as Xueqi. Only after Wind Chaser's greatsword landed had everyone realized that he had missed. Hee, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Big Brother Yifeng hasn't even warmed up yet. Evening Lotus giggled. On their way back to the shelter, Xueqi had frequently used void steps to kill chieftains. That mysterious style of footwork of his was simply unstoppable. In comparison, the technique of using an afterimage to dodge an attack was a trifling matter. The others began laughing when they heard Evening Lotus's words. Nobody believed her at all. In the arena, Wind Chaser finally became serious. Every one of his attacks began targeting Xueqi's vital points or blind spots. Of the berserker's many attacks, his skills contained the most power. Wind Chaser was also extremely proficient in using his skills in conjunction with his ordinary attacks. It was as if the berserker's skills had been tailored for Wind Chaser. So that's the case. I didn't think that the 100-berry wine possessed such a wonderful effect. It is no wonder the drink is so rare. While Xueqi dodged Wind Chaser's attacks, he also carefully observed the berserker's every action. Although Wind Chaser did have significant physical control, he should still not be able to use his skills so smoothly. In Zero Wing, only Fire Dance and Violet Cloud had achieved this standard. The two were only a thread away from taking half a step into the refinement realm. On the other hand, Wind Chaser was still far from reaching that level. The only explanation Xueqi could come up with was that the 100-berry wine increased a player's compatibility rate with their weapons. Thinking up to this point, Xueqi involuntarily shivered. Improving compatibility rate. This was something that countless experts dreamed of. Otherwise, nobody would bother wasting so much effort to obtain weapons and equipment that fit their styles. Chapter 596. Unbalanced Fight. After seeing the 100-berry wine's true function, Xueqi finally understood why Blue Frost and the others could achieve such high skill completion rates. Unfortunately, the wine supply was simply too low, lowering the number of potential experts who could be nurtured with it. At most, there was just enough for everyone present. Any more and there wouldn't be enough of the beverage to go around. For the next 3 minutes or so, Wind Chaser continued hacking and slashing his great sword at Xueqi. The more Wind Chaser fought Xueqi, the more he grew frightened. Aside from his first whirlwind slash, none of his other attacks had touched Xuefeng. Every time he thought that his great sword was about to connect with Xuefeng's body, his weapon was always off its mark just slightly. After a dozen or so times, he could chalk it up to a coincidence. However, if over 100 attacks had the same result, there was definitely no coincidence. Just what is going on? Why can't I hit him? This was the first time Wind Chaser had encountered such a situation. In his past PvP battles, both sides had always suffered some form of damage. It was only a matter of how much, or how little, damage each side suffered. The side with the better techniques would naturally deal more damage, and as the battle dragged on, they would become the victor. However, this battle, in which he could not even hit his opponent, was simply driving him to madness. Is the gap between us really that big? Wind Chaser had already used all of the skills he could, yet, no matter what he did, he could not even scratch the corner of Xuefeng's armor. This failure dealt him a huge psychological blow. Big Brother Yifeng's dodging techniques are brilliant. This is my first time seeing such techniques. Shallow Moon, the leader of District 1's third party, grew excited as she watched the battle between Xuefeng and Wind Chaser progress. She desperately tried to absorb whatever information she could regarding Xuefeng's dodging techniques. Shallow Moon wasn't the only person with such thoughts. The other leaders also wore stern expressions as they focused on Xuefeng's every action. They even recorded the battle for future reference. If I can grasp just half of Brother Yifeng's dodging techniques, it will become much easier to kill Lord-ranked monsters in the future. Best Reincarnation side. You don't say? Lords have extremely high attack power. If an MT can evade 50% of a Lord's attacks, this will significantly reduce the burden on healers. Unfortunately, nobody within our District 1 has managed to reach such a standard yet. As a cleric, Evening Lotus had the most say on this matter. She was the #1 cleric on District 1's first party. Every time the party's MT tanked a lord, the MT's HP would fall as quickly as flowing water. As a result, Evening Lotus was forced to heal their party's MT constantly. If she were not careful, she could easily draw the lord's aggro. It really makes you wonder just how Brother Yifeng learned such techniques. If the melee players in our parties can learn from him, our District 1's first shelter can unlock the next stage very quickly. As long as their melee players could grasp this brilliant technique, they could easily hunt chieftains and lords out in the field. Their soul crystal farming efficiency would also rise significantly. At that time, they could upgrade their shelter swiftly and catch up to the several large shelters in other regions. Although District 1 was the top shelter in the Evil Ghost domain, it was only a medium shelter. Although their shelter was the only medium shelter among the Evil Ghost domain's districts, other domains already possessed large shelters. Their strength was several times greater than District 1's. The gap between them would only widen further as more time passed. Leader Frost, is there no way to convince Brother Yifeng to join our District 1? Blue Bull asked. Although Blue Bull was the first party's #1 berserker, Xuefeng's techniques left a deep impact. These techniques shattered the concept of their past combat methods. If they could persuade Yifeng to join District 1 and become one of the shelter's residents, it could lift the shelter to a whole different level. Hearing Blue Bull's suggestion, the other party leaders also turned to Blue Frost. You guys. Blue Frost was rendered speechless. Although I want that as well, Brother Yifeng is a maverick. You all know how mavericks behave, right? It really is a pity. The others sighed dejectedly when they recalled Maverick's playstyles. The shelter was like their home. Naturally, they wanted to see their shelter grow stronger. Unfortunately, Mavericks did not like restrictions. As the conversation came to an end, Xuefeng stopped dodging Wind Chaser's attacks. I have most of the information that I need. Let's end this match. Xuefeng had already obtained a thorough understanding of Wind Chaser's strength and the 100 berry wines effect. There was no reason to prolong this battle. Immediately, he used void steps and vanished before everyone's eyes. He disappeared. Wind Chaser gaped at his surroundings in disbelief. Looking to his left, right, and even above him, he could not find any trace of Xuefeng. Where is he? Wind Chaser could not even sense Xuefeng's presence. Normally, when an assassin snuck up to him, even if he could not see the assassin, he could, more or less, sense that someone was nearby. Now, he could not detect even the slightest indication of Xuefeng's presence. The swordsman's technique was far more powerful than an assassin's stealth. Everyone in the spectator stands was similarly stupefied. A live human had actually vanished into thin air. No swordsman should possess any stealth-related skills. Once a match began, players could only exit the arena after a victor had been determined. The victor's portrait would also be displayed above the arena after the match ended. If one of the fighters suddenly logged out of the game, the system would automatically determine them as the loser, thereby concluding the match. However, the system had yet to declare the outcome of this match. Thus, the only possibility was that they were really unable to see Xueqi. However, before everyone could recover from their shock, Xueqi appeared beside Wind Chaser. He then swung his sword, sending 3 silver moons towards the berserker's body, intersecting as they struck. Such a fast attack. Although Wind Chaser tried to defend himself with his great sword, Xueqi's sword was simply too fast. The attack landed before he could even react. The force behind Xueqi's chop sent Wind Chaser flying backward. Although they both possessed the same attributes, Xueqi's chop had achieved a 95% completion rate. The skill effect he displayed instantly extinguished over 50% of the youthful berserker's HP. Is he really a swordsman? Wind Chaser was terrified when he saw how much HP he had lost. When he had fought other swordsmen with the same attributes as his own in the past, their chop only managed to devour close to 20% of his HP. Now, however, Xueqi's chop had obliterated over half of his HP. This disparity was insane. Wind Chaser even wondered if the system had made a mistake. What Wind Chaser did not know, however, was that the abyssal blade Xueqi wielded had a 50% chance to deal 200% damage. Adding in his 95% skill completion rate, his total damage was astounding. It's over. Xueqi looked at Wind Chaser, who he had thrown backward, and used Dragon Breath. Dragon Breath was a skill he had gained from a fragmented legendary item. Not only did the skill possess frightening power, but it also required no casting time. The skill's attack speed was also extremely high. In the next moment, a green ray of light devoured Wind Chaser. Inflicting 6 times Xueqi's damage, Dragon Breath depleted Wind Chaser's HP to 0. It's over. The spectating crowd was dumbfounded. Although they had long since realized that Xueqi could defeat Wind Chaser easily, they had not expected him to be capable of finishing off the youthful berserker instantly. How was it possible for a swordsman to instantly kill a plate armor class? Chapter 597. Zero Wing Guild Branch. Even if everyone found it inconceivable, the appearance of Xueqi's portrait above the arena was irrefutable proof that he had won this match. If he can defeat Wind Chaser so easily, despite having the same attributes, it is no wonder how he can solo a great lord. Best Reincarnation and the others were shocked. With their standards, even if they fought an ordinary player with the same attributes, it was impossible for them to defeat their opponent instantly. Yet Xueqi was fully capable of exactly that. The gap between them was simply unimaginable. If before they had treated Xueqi as an expert, now, they treated him like a monster. They were people living in completely different worlds. Meanwhile, Wind Chaser, who had revived below the arena, was still stuck in a daze. Chaser, didn't I tell you earlier? With your weak skills, you are simply flaunting your incompetence before an expert. Why haven't you thanked Brother Yi Feng for his pointers yet? Blue Frost laughed when he saw Wind Chaser's stunned expression. He was the slightest bit surprised by Wind Chaser's crushing defeat. Compared to the battle with the great Lord Noya, this match was child's play to Xueqi. Hearing Blue Frost's words, Wind Chaser hurriedly thanked Xueqi. After this match, Wind Chaser finally understood the extent of his strength. Following which, the leaders also turned to ask Xueqi for advice on their combat techniques. Bombarded with questions, Xueqi's response to the situation was not miserly, graciously teaching them, one after another. Before anyone knew it, 3 hours had passed. Even so, none of them could get enough of Xueqi. His guidance was targeted towards improving everyone's individual weaknesses, allowing them to see immediate improvements to their combat power. This result furthered everyone's admiration of Xueqi. Not only did Xueqi possess monster-like strength, but his teaching skills were also on point. In reality though, Xueqi had only made a few suggestions to remedy their bad combat habits and teach them how to control their foundations. They were unlike Fire Dance and the others, who Lei Bao had personally trained to control their bodies properly. May I know if Brother Frost would be willing to sell me 100-berry wine for the long term? The 100-berry wine sorely tempted Xueqi. Although the residents of District 1 had the 100-berry wine to improve their compatibility rates, they did not possess the foundations necessary to display its full effects. If he had some of the wine for Fire Dance and the others to consume, they would most likely see massive improvements immediately. Brother Yifeng, you should know that the 100-berry wine is a specialty of the Lion's Bar, and its supply is very limited. If it is only a few dozen bottles, I have no problems with giving them to you. However, you saw the 100-berry wine's effects for yourself. It can help us improve our skill completion rates, making it easier for us to understand our skills. If we sell it long-term, it will weaken our shelter's players significantly, Blue Frost explained. I understand this, of course. However, what if I have a different method to improve the shelter's strength? Xueqi smiled. Improve the shelter's strength? Everyone present was suddenly interested. The competition between shelters was very intense. Moreover, as players reached higher levels, the intensity would only grow as fewer high-level maps and resources would be available. Naturally, the areas where players could station shelters would also decrease. Naturally, those with sufficient strength would have priority over the high-resource locations, whereas weaker players would be chased away. Their District 1 had already competed with other shelters many times. In higher-leveled maps, however, the shelters they had to compete with would become more numerous and powerful, so upgrading their shelter's strength was of utmost importance. Join my guild, Zero Wing, Xueqi said. Join your guild. Everyone was stunned. They all knew what a guild was. There were countless guilds in the virtual gaming world. In fact, members of guilds had formed many of the shelters. Only, as there was no guild system available in their location, nobody could officially establish a guild here. Rather than joining a guild, it was more like joining a guild's forces. Many shelters that lacked strength would usually choose to subordinate themselves to a guild's influence, gaining protection and assistance from said guild forces. In return, however, these shelters were required to supply various resources and money to these guilds. Every guild force they knew of was extremely powerful with a plethora of experts. For example, all large shelters were a part of a guild force. Medium shelters, like District 1, stood no chance against them. These guild forces also had plenty of funds and consisted mostly of professional gamers. After considering it for a moment, Blue Frost said, "If we join you, what can Brother Yifeng's guild provide? How are you going to help us increase the shelter's strength?" In truth, Blue Frost had thought of joining a guild force before. Many guild forces had come to recruit their District 1. However, if they joined one, it would have to be a formidable guild force. That way, they could strive for much more resources for themselves. Otherwise, they would be better off running the shelter without a guild. If you join Zero Wing, we will provide you with teleportation magic arrays so that you can save on travel time. Zero Wing will also provide you with funding and equipment and will train you all to be true experts, Xueqi said. Teleportation magic arrays. You guys actually managed to obtain that kind of item? Shock swept through the small crowd as they stared at Xueqi, their jaws practically hitting the floor. As far as they knew, teleportation arrays weren't available in this area. Even large shelters didn't have any. If their shelter had teleportation arrays, they could save so much time. With that advantage, it'd be difficult for their shelter not to grow stronger, even if they tried. Brother Yifeng, are you telling us the truth? Blue Frost asked excitedly. Don't believe me? Xueqi laughed. He then retrieved the teleportation magic array design from his bag, placing it on the table for all to see. Here, have a look at it yourselves. Wow! It's really a teleportation magic array design. Evening Lotus's eyes shone as she examined the forging design on the table. This item was more tempting than any weapon or piece of equipment. You've seen it for yourselves now. If you all are willing to join Zero Wing, we will provide your shelter with teleportation arrays. At that time, your shelter will develop at never-before-seen speeds. Becoming an advanced shelter will become possible, not to mention a large shelter, Xueqi said confidently. Just like the towns and cities in the outside world, The shelters in the dark den were categorized into ranks. There were small shelters, medium shelters, large shelters, advanced shelters, and more. As a shelter climbed the ranks, they would have access to more functions. However, it was not easy to upgrade a shelter's rank, as doing so required a large number of soul crystals. I understand. Since Brother Yifeng has such an optimistic view of District 1's shelter, my first party will join Zero Wing, Blue Frost said after considering the opportunity for a long moment. Since Blue Frost has agreed, my second party will join as well, Best Reincarnation said as he nodded. My third party will also join. Shallow Moon agreed. In just a short moment, the top 10 parties of District 1 all agreed to join Zero Wing. They were not fools. To put it simply, teleportation arrays were like strategic weapons to a shelter. If news of this got out, countless shelters would vie to join Zero Wing. Moreover, after seeing how powerful Xueqi was, they realized that the guild behind him would not be any ordinary existence. Chapter 598. Gaining Control over District 1. After gaining everyone's agreement, Xueqi handed out contracts to each party leader and vice leader. Not one of them was an ordinary player. They all were players at the top of District 1. Naturally, they would not join Zero Wing as normal members, but middle managers at the very least. And since they were going to become Zero Wing's middle managers, they needed to sign contracts. By the time Xueqi had arrived at the shelter, he had already considered establishing a Zero Wing guild branch here. The dark den was different from the outside world. Players here had a much easier time obtaining gemstones and Tier 1 taboo skills, as well as the specialties unique to various shelters. It was especially true for District 1's 100-berry wine. This was an extremely rare item that could help improve a player's compatibility rate. If this beverage were introduced to the outside world, it would help Zero Wing immensely in the future. Correspondingly, the development of life classes within the dark den was very slow. There were practically no players producing advanced products here. Particularly, consumables that players normally required to survive out in the fields were extremely hard to come by. These advanced consumables would certainly bolster the shelter's strength if he could supply them. The reason Fantasy Shrine had been able to develop so quickly in the past must be due to their trades with the shelter. Xueqi suddenly thought about the first-rate guild, Fantasy Shrine, which was located in the Black Dragon Empire. In the past, Fantasy Extinguisher had accepted this epic quest and turned Fantasy Shrine into one of the Black Dragon Empire's giants. Back then, even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's branch guild could not afford to provoke Fantasy Shrine casually. One could just imagine how helpful the trades between the two were to a guild. After everyone had looked over the contract Xueqi had provided, surprise colored their expressions. This Zero Wing sure is rich. It's offering a wage that's twice what other guilds offer. Just what kind of guild is this? Blue Frost had encountered many guild forces before. He had also heard of these guilds' reputations, and many of them were second-rate guilds. Unfortunately, although the wages these guilds offered District 1's top 10 parties were tempting, they required far too many soul crystals in return. Submitting to these guilds would only hinder their shelter's development. In the end, they rejected all the offers they had received. In comparison, not only was Xueqi offering wages that would allow them to play God's domain full-time, but he also intended to supply various advanced products to hasten their development. Most importantly, he did not require any soul crystals at all. This was astounding. Soul crystals were the foundation of shelters. It was one of the resources required that players required to grow stronger. If they could gain so many benefits without having to contribute any soul crystals, they'd willingly join as normal members, much less middle managers. If there aren't any issues, you can sign the contract. Xueqi involuntarily laughed as he saw everyone's dazed expressions. He had written this contract after taking into account the best interests of Blue Frost and the others. Not a single guild force could afford such an offer. Soul crystals might be important to Blue Frost and the others, but to Xueqi, these items held no value whatsoever. After Xueqi's reminder, everyone hurriedly signed their contracts. With the top 10 parties of District 1 joining Zero Wing, his guild would have control over the entire shelter. Previously, Xueqi had learned about shelter's development model. The top 10 parties of every shelter had special privileges. Aside from being able to purchase the shelter's specialties, these parties also had a say in the shelter's construction. They had the right to vote on which establishments they wanted to construct first. Take the Lion's Bar for example. Over half of the top 10 parties needed to agree before the Lion's Bar could be constructed. Meanwhile, in order to construct special buildings such as the Lion's Bar, players would have to use the soul crystals accumulated by the shelter. These accumulated soul crystals were what players normally exchanged for contribution shares. Hence, taking control of the top 10 parties of a shelter was the equivalent to taking control of the entire shelter. With District 1 as the center, Xueqi could then popularize the candlelight trading firm's products to other shelters. Soon, the entire Evil Ghost domain would become Zero Wing's resource warehouse. At that time, Zero Wing's development speed would soar. Brother Frost, as the leader of First Party, you should be the most familiar with the shelter. Do you know of any methods to increase the 100-berry wine's production? Xueqi asked as he turned to Blue Frost. In the past, although the 100-berry wine had been extremely rare, Xueqi had still managed to procure some for himself. However, if District 1 could only produce 20 bottles per day, how could Fantasy Shrine have possibly afforded to sell it? The only possibility was that the supply of the 100-berry wine was not limited to this amount. However, the specialties available to every shelter were random. It was extremely rare for a shelter to obtain a specialty such as the 100-berry wine. Moreover, even with 10 shelters producing them, the total still wouldn't be enough to sate a single first-rate guild's demands, much less others' demands. I do know of a way to increase the 100-berry wine's production. Currently, the Lion's Bar is only a 1-star bar. If we promote it to a 2-star bar, then the production will increase to 50 bottles a day. 100 bottles a day if we can upgrade the bar to 3 stars. However, that will require a lot of soul crystals. With our shelter's current stock, it is impossible for us to promote the Lion's Bar. Blue Frost also wanted to increase the 100-berry wine's production. However, the soul crystal requirement was staggering. I see. It seems that it won't be possible in a short time. Xueqi frowned slightly. In truth, there is another method, Blue Frost suddenly said. Only, this method is very costly, and nobody is willing to do it. Let me hear it, Xueqi said. The Lion's Bar Independent Promotion. Through this method, the number of soul crystals required will decrease significantly. However, that would require spending your own money for everyone else's benefit. Also, the soul crystals spent will not gain you any contribution shares, Blue Frost explained. If we use the soul crystals that everyone has contributed, we will need 10,000 crystals to upgrade the Lion's Bar to 2-star status. Independently, only 500 will be required. However, even combining the soul crystals of all 10 parties, we still don't have 500 crystals. How many are you guys missing? Xueqi asked after giving the situation some thought. Based on our previous calculations, our parties only have slightly more than 300 soul crystals right now. We are short by almost 200, Blue Frost said, smiling bitterly. That's quite a lot. However, it is not an impossible task. Xueqi nodded and continued. Let's do it this way. Frost, you try to buy as many soul crystals as possible for now. I'll try to obtain some myself as well. It is of utmost importance that we upgrade the Lion's Bar to 2 stars. Okay, I'll try my best. In truth, Blue Frost had considered upgrading the Lion's Bar independently as well. Only before today, the 10 parties had not been of one mind. There would still be a few among them who would hold back some of their crystals, afraid that they would suffer if they lost too many. However, now that the top 10 parties of District 1 had become members of Zero Wing, they had become a family. With this, it would be much easier to do things like this. From this point onward, District 1's shelter would truly be united. After Xueqi finished arranging the matters relating to District 1's shelter, he departed from District 1, heading towards District 5. Chapter 599. Great Demon. It had only been a day since Xueqi had left District 5. However, when Xueqi arrived at District 5's shelter once more, a massive change had occurred. What happened to the shelter? Xueqi was shocked when he saw the sight before him. The originally flourishing shelter of District 5 had become a pile of ruins. The tall walls which had surrounded the shelter were no more, and collapsed houses littered the area within what little walls remained. He could find no sign of anyone inside the shelter. The rotting corpses of various monsters decorated the spacious streets. Moreover, these monsters were all level 40 or above, far exceeding the level of this region. Among these monsters, a majority were elites. There were also plenty of special elites and chieftains as well. A lord. After entering District 5 shelter, on the second street Xueqi crossed, he discovered the corpse of a 3-story tall black bear. Nightmare bear, demonic creature, lord rank. Level 40. HP 0/2-800-000. Even in the evil ghost domain, lord-ranked monsters were extremely rare. Based on Xueqi's understanding, the monster armies that assaulted shelters every night almost never had any lords. The strongest monsters in these assaults were usually chieftains. Yet, right before him, Xueqi could see the corpses of 4 lords on the street. One could just imagine how intense this monster assault on District 5 had been. Just what happened here? Even after running down several streets, Xueqi still failed to discover any other players. It was as if District 5 had become a ghost city overnight. Normally, even when a shelter had been invaded, players would not retreat from the region so quickly. When Xueqi arrived at District 5 Central Street, players' screams reached his ears. This was not the first time Xueqi had heard such screams of pain. However, he had only heard them in the past. This was his first time hearing such a desperate and painful wail in this life. Xueqi then activated Windwalk and dashed towards the source of the cries. However, when Xueqi was 200 yards away from the source, his body suddenly felt extremely heavy. It was as if he had just jumped into a quagmire. Crap! This is a domain! Xueqi immediately jumped backward, retreating from the domain's range. Domain. It was something only high-tiered creatures were capable of using. Take Weissman, who was the magistrate of White River City and a Tier 4 Great Wizard, for example. He was capable of summoning a magic domain that would empower himself and suppress his enemies. If someone without a domain faced someone with one, unless they were far stronger than the latter, escape and death were the only available options. Meanwhile, one had to be at least Tier 4 to use a domain. In other words, there was at least a Tier 4 monster at the heart of this screaming. Since it was a player screaming, one could easily conclude that the Tier 4 creature was an enemy. Why would a Tier 4 creature be here? Xueqi was greatly surprised. Based on players' current levels, encountering such a creature should be impossible, not to mention in such a low-level region. Xueqi hurriedly jumped onto a collapsed rooftop and looked towards the origin of the screams. At this moment, 3 players were still alive on the central street. Discipline Paradise, someone Xueqi was familiar with, stood in the lead. The other 2 were a level 28 assassin and a level 28 berserker. At this moment, however, all 3 of their HPs were very low. All sorts of level 40 monsters surrounded them, making escape impossible. Worst of all, a pitch-black demon with bat-like wings and blood-red eyes hovered high above them. Nettle, demonic creature, great demon. Level 60. HP 50, 000, 000/50, 000, 000. What is a Tier 4 great demon doing here? Xueqi was astonished when he saw Nettle. Demons were enemies to the human race. As long as a demon appeared within God's domain, the armies of various countries throughout the continent would set out to exterminate them immediately. Hence, encountering a demon was rare, not to mention a great demon's. Although Nettle was only a level 60 great demon, to current players, he was invincible. He was something players simply could not afford to provoke. Despicable human, I'll give you one last chance to live. Surrender the Moloch's ring that you stole and submit. Nettle glared down at Discipline Paradise and said coldly, otherwise, I will give you a taste of soul fire, destroying your soul just like your companion. Xueqi immediately sucked in a breath of cold air when he heard Nettle's words. To players, their souls were very important, and damage would bring about severe consequences. It was just like when Xueqi collected the immortal souls of players he killed, and as a result, said players were unable to log into God's domain for a short time. However, what he collected was only a small portion of a player's immortal soul. If soul fire burned a player's soul completely, the consequences would be unimaginable. This penalty would not be limited to being unable to play the game for a few days. If a player's soul were burned by soul fire, their account would be crippled. They would have no choice but to restart an account and obtain a new immortal soul. Just what kind of quest did Discipline Paradise take on for it to have such a frightening penalty? Shifeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw the black flame in the great demon's hand. Tier 4 creatures, particularly a Tier 4 great demon like Nettle, would not come here for no good reason. The only explanation Shifeng could come up with was a quest. Meanwhile, Discipline Paradise must have failed to complete this quest on time, and as a result, incurred such a punishment. This penalty was similar to the penalty of Shifeng's epic quest, Darkness Descends. You want me to submit? Not in a million years. I'll fight you to the end. Discipline Paradise shouted as he threw his shield at the great demon Nettle. Before the golden shield hit Nettle, however, the great demon effortlessly caught the flying shield with a single hand. Nettle lightly clenched his fist. Pang! With just a squeeze, a level 25 fine gold shield was crushed. To a Tier 4 creature, it was an easy task to destroy fine gold equipment. Only dark gold equipment could withstand its power for some time. The two players standing by Discipline Paradise's sides were immediately terrified. Since you aren't willing to become my servant, you can die. Nettle sneered. With a light wave of his hand, black flames rained down on Discipline Paradise. Discipline Paradise's group of 3 had no hope of defending against the rain of soul fire. Not only did their HPs rapidly deplete, but they also released agonizing wails due to the burning pain. The black flames devoured the trio for over a dozen seconds. Only when all 3 had turned to ash did the black flames disappear. This is going to be troublesome. A headache began to plague Shifeng. He had only managed to obtain the chapter of darkness after much difficulty. Yet, now, Discipline Paradise had accepted a horrible quest that was impossible to complete and was even forced to recreate his account. How was he supposed to go to the dark den right now? Ha! What's that? With his extraordinary vision, Shifeng discovered a flashing black light amidst Discipline Paradise's ashes. A ring! Suddenly, Shifeng recalled the Morlock's ring that the great demon Nettle had previously mentioned. That ring should be an item that would trigger a quest. Since it was a quest item, it naturally would not disappear with Discipline Paradise. Instead, it would remain and wait for the next player to come along. Is that ring somehow related to the Dark Den? Shifeng could not help but wonder. Before this, he had asked Blue Frost about the Dark Denver. However, Blue Frost did not know anything. He had not known that the chapter of darkness could open the gate leading to the Dark Den either. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for the leading figure of District 1 to possess less information than Discipline Paradise. The only explanation was that Discipline Paradise had obtained this information through some special means. Moreover, Discipline Paradise had been very eager to get his hands on the chapter of darkness. Now, a great demon had appeared to retrieve a ring. If one were to claim that the ring and the chapter of darkness were unrelated, who would believe it? I can only give it a try. Shifeng gritted his teeth. He then dashed forward towards the ring with intense speed. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.